In order to stand out among the countless stalls on this food street, a unique and irresistible aroma was clearly imperative, as the passers-by on the street would always notice the aroma of the food being sold first. To the people of Rodu, roast meat wasn't some rare delicacy. However, the aroma of Mag's roast meat had attracted the attention of everyone in the general vicinity. This was not what ordinary roast meat smelled like. It was difficult to imagine just what kind of roast meat could be emitting such a delectable aroma. Even the aroma of the roast beef from Kari's rotisserie couldn't come close to comparing with this. Everyone unconsciously craned their neck as they cast their eyes toward Mag's stall, trying to determine what he had added to his roast beef. He's using the same beef I use, but why is the aroma so vastly different? This is incredible. Sinclair looked on with wide incredulous eyes at the sight of the sizzling cubes of beef on the roasting rack. He had thought that he was quite skilled in the art of roast meat. However, he was struck by a sense of inferiority as he looked at the roast beef that Mag was cooking. The employee from Kari's rotisserie gulped, but he pursed his lips as he murmured to himself, "It may smell good, but there's no way that it'll taste anywhere near as good as head chef Ike's roast meat. Besides, how could a roadside stall like this possibly get as many customers as our rotisserie? That smells so good. Is it really roast meat that he's cooking?" Irina took a whiff of the delightful aroma in the air, upon which her eyes immediately lit up. She stared at Mag with awe and wonder in her eyes as she murmured to herself, could it be that he really learned how to cook? Father is really super good at cooking. If you become Father's wife, you'll be able to taste his cooking every day, Amy tempted with a wide smile. An exasperated smile appeared on Irina's face as she scoffed, "Do you introduce every beautiful big sister you see to your father as a candidate to become his wife?" Amy shook her head with a serious expression, and replied, "No way. I think you're the only one that's right for Father. I've never introduced any other big sisters to Father before." "Really?" Irina was a little skeptical. "Really?" Amy nodded with nothing but straightforward honesty in her large blue eyes. "Then what about your mother? Did your father ever tell you about her?" Irina asked in a quiet voice. "Father says Mother is living on the moon. Every night, when I see the moon, it's just like seeing Mother." Amy pointed up at the sky before turning to Irina with a smile as she said, "I think that my mother must be super beautiful, just like you, big sister Irina. Father is too lonely by himself, so I wanted to introduce you to him. Father really is a super good man. And you're a really good daughter." Irina gently stroked Amy's silver hair. She was very touched that Amy could be so thoughtful at such a young age, and she gently said, "Your mother must be very beautiful, and she'll be very happy to see that you're all grown up. She'll be able to come and find you soon." Amy's eyes immediately lit up with surprise and elation as she asked, "Really? Do you know my mother, big sister Irina?" "I do. Your mother is the most beautiful elf in the entire elven race, so of course I know her. She's also the most powerful elf as well, there aren't many people in this city that could defeat her," Irina replied with a proud expression. "Wow! Mother's so awesome." Amy's eyes were glittering with awe and admiration. "She sure is, and she'll come to find you sooner or later." Irina nodded with a smile as she turned her gaze toward Mag, and said, "That's why you have to keep an eye on your father, and make sure that no other women approach him with ulterior motives. Otherwise, when your mother comes back, she'll beat him to death." "Is she that scary?" "Father may not be able to beat Mother." Amy's eyes widened as if she had realized just how important this matter was. She nodded earnestly, and said, "All right, I'll look after Father and chase away all of the other women with ulterior motives." "Good girl." Irina nodded with a content expression. "But big sister Irina, what is an ulterior motive?" Amy asked with a perplexed look. Irina looked at Amy, and was temporarily at a loss for how to define this concept. "Is it the type of women who say stuff like, 'Boss Mag, I want to bear your children,' or 'Boss Mag, I want to marry you,' or 'Boss Mag, I'll warm your bed for you if you give me another bowl of tofu pudding. Amy asked. Are they really saying that? Irina narrowed her eyes as a dangerous aura began to seep out of her body. The situation appeared to be worse than she had imagined. Do these women want to die? You should blast these women with fireballs to teach them what shame is. Irina clenched her fists. But if I do that, I'll have to burn a lot of people to death every day, and father won't be happy with me. Amy looked down at her little hands with a conflicted expression. Is he really that popular with women? Irina turned to Meg with a skeptical look. He now had a completely unfamiliar face with softer lines compared to Alex's angular features. The sight of him concentrating on roast beef struck her with a momentary sense of entrancement. He looked a lot like Alex during sword practice. However, he was dedicating his focus and concentration to cooking instead. She could no longer sense powerful energy fluctuations from his body. In fact, he appeared to be rather feeble. However, she was already extremely glad that he was able to recover to this extent after being completely disabled and having all of his meridians severed. Let me protect you from now on, Alex, Irina thought to herself as her eyes glazed over. Meg carried a plate of roast meat over to them and placed it in front of Irina with a smile. Here's some freshly roasted beef, have some and tell me what you think. The cubes of beef were still sizzling with oil, and the aromas of beef, black pepper and cumin were flowing relentlessly into her nostrils. Each and every one of the cubes of beef had toothpicks protruding from them, and the entire plate was filled with such cubes of beef. It smells so good. I wonder what it tastes like. It does look very delicious, but I still feel like it's too expensive to charge a silver coin for just a small cube. That's true. Now that I think about it, his prices are no cheaper than the prices being charged at Carrie's rotisserie. All of the bystanders were discussing quietly among themselves as they stared at Amy and Irina. I'm digging in. Amy picked up a toothpick and blew on the cube of beef on the end several times before placing it into her mouth. Her eyes immediately lit up as she chewed with glee, and her body and head were swaying from side to side as a blissful look appeared on her face. Before long, she had already finished her first cube of beef. Amy wore a joyful expression as she swallowed her mouth full of beef. After doing that, she stuck out her little pink tongue and licked the sauce from around her lips as a sweet smile illuminated her adorable little face. All right, let me risk my life to taste Alex's roast meat. Irina steeled herself as she glanced at the smiling Meg, and then picked up a toothpick for herself. The delectable aroma of roast beef became even more pronounced as she brought the cube of meat closer to her nose. Upon closer inspection, she could tell that the sauce had been applied in a very even layer, while the surface of the cube of beef was glistening faintly with oil, making it appear extremely alluring. She blew gently on the cube of beef before taking a bite. This flavor! It's absolutely incredible! Irina's expression immediately lit up. As soon as the beef entered her mouth, its slightly charred surface melted over her palate along with the garlic-flavored sauce. She normally detested garlic for its sharp and overwhelming flavor, but the flavor of this garlic sauce was very mellow and delicious. As she carefully chewed into the meat, it immediately fell apart in her mouth, releasing even more potent flavors of beef and garlic. She felt as if her taste buds were rejoicing from the extraordinary flavor, and she was simply unable to stop eating. This beef is far too delicious, I almost bit my own tongue. I can't believe anyone in this world is capable of cooking such amazing roast beef. It's even more astonishing that this was cooked by Alex. Irina's eyes were shimmering with a multitude of emotions as she stared at Meg. However, her gaze didn't linger on him for long, as she simply couldn't keep her eyes away from the plate of beef sitting before her. She picked up another toothpick and closed her eyes as she placed the cube of beef on the end into her mouth, basking in the flavor explosion that was wreaking havoc over her palate. A sweet and blissful smile that mirrored Amy's appeared on her face. Gulp! The collective gulp from the spectators was very pronounced. Do they have to eat in such an alluring manner? I feel like this stall owner is cheating. I feel like my heart is about to melt. I really want a daughter all of a sudden. Her smile is so adorable. You guys can have the kebabs, I just want to steal the owner's daughter. Even that beautiful elf looks like she's really enjoying that beef, I have to taste one for myself. Boss, please get me a cube of beef. All of the bystanders were extremely tempted to taste Mag's beef for themselves at the sight of Amy and Irina's blissful expressions. Sinclair gulped as he looked at the cubes of beef placed in front of Amy and Irina. He was very curious about just how delicious Mag's roast beef was. You can have some too, but get ready to start taking payments after that. Mag handed a small plate with 5 cubes of beef on it to Sinclair. Thank you, Boss Mag. Sinclair accepted the plate with glee. Gulp. A pronounced gulp escaped from the mouth of the employee from Carey's rotisserie, but he quickly turned away with an awkward look on his face. If you really want to eat one, you can pay for one, Mag reminded in a thoughtful manner. Humph. The employee turned around so that his back was facing Mag, and his shoulders were trembling with rage. Oh! This flavor is incredible. I can't believe roast beef can be this delicious. My roast beef is absolute trash in comparison. If I had tasted such delicious roast beef earlier, I would have never brought shame on myself by setting up a roast beef stall. Sinclair had tears pouring down his face as he chewed on a mouthful of beef. His emotional range only further verified the notion that he was much more suited to a career in acting than in cooking. Mag shook his head as he turned around, hoping that customers wouldn't be put off by the sight of a heavily bearded man sobbing beside his roast beef stall. The reactions of Irina and Amy were simply far too tempting, and many of the customers who weren't interested in tasting Mag's beef were changing their minds. 1 silver coin wasn't a very steep price. Even though it was rather strange that he was selling beef in cubes and limiting purchases to 1 cube per person, this still didn't detract from the fact that his roast beef really did look delicious. Boss, get me a cube of roast beef. I'll also get one, boss. Mag placed a new batch of beef cubes onto the roasting rack while calling the sobbing Sinclair over to take payments. Coming. Sinclair set the empty plate in his hand aside and wiped away his tears with his apron. He immediately put on a smile and began to work as Mag's cashier. In the beginning, he had been rather skeptical of Mag, but after tasting his roast meat, Sinclair was full of confidence. If roast beef that was this delicious couldn't beat Carey's rotisserie, then the customers were clearly the problem. I feel so satisfied right now. Irina's heart was filled with bliss as she looked down at her empty plate and savored the lingering flavor in her mouth. Could it be that he's been studying cooking for the past 3 years? Does that mean he really hates my cooking, so he decided to learn how to cook for himself? Irina narrowed her eyes in contemplation before shaking her head. No way, he told me that himself that my cooking is really delicious. I'm still quite a gifted chef. Big sister Irina, father's roast beef is super delicious, right? Amy turned to Irina with a proud smile on her little face. It really is. Irina nodded, and she also wore a proud look on her face. My man is naturally good at everything. The first batch of roast beef for the customers was soon ready. All of them were still sizzling as they were handed directly to the customer with toothpicks acting as a handle. As such, there was no need to organize seating or packaging, and the serving process was extremely fast and efficient. Oh, it's so hot! But it really is extremely delicious. I've never had such delicious food before. This is amazing. I haven't ever had roast beef from Carey's rotisserie before, but there's no way that it can be better than this. Boss, give me 10 more cubes. I also want 10 more cubes. All of the customers who had just purchased cubes of beef immediately returned and asked for more. My apologies, but my roast beef is limited to 1 cube per person. Mag stopped Sinclair just as he was about to accept payments from repeat customers. He smiled, and said, due to our bet with Carey's rotisserie today, we'll only be selling 1 cube of roast beef per person. Boss, I only want 1 more. Just 1 more. Please, you can't be so cruel. I can eat 100 cubes of this beef easily. How can you give me a taste, but deny me when I ask for more? A portly customer begged with a grief-stricken look. If you sell one more cube of beef to all of us, we'll all support you, another customer chimed in. How about we sell them another one, Boss Mag? Sinclair was also siding with the customers. He had never had so many customers visiting his stall before, and he felt as if he were on cloud nine. My apologies, but rules are rules. Please don't keep the customers behind you from making their orders. Mag shook his head with a firm smile on his face. Right at this moment, a lavish horse-drawn carriage stopped nearby, and a middle-aged man in a set of lavish robes disembarked with a surprised look on his face. Why is it so lively here today? What? That's impossible. After hearing the restaurant employee's report, Ike was in complete disbelief, and his loud yell startled many of the customers in the rotisserie. You're telling me that people are lining up to buy his roast meat? The employee nodded uneasily as he replied, yes. He's only selling 1 cube per customer, but there are still many customers wanting to buy his roast meat, and those who have already tasted his beef are begging him for more. All of the chefs in the kitchen became rather nervous upon hearing this. They were placing the honor of Carey's rotisserie on this bet. If they couldn't even beat a roadside stall, what right did they have to call themselves the #1 rotisserie of Rodu? Ike contemplated the situation momentarily before shaking his head with a confident look. Don't worry, the customers aren't idiots, they'll know that they've fallen for a trap soon. How can roast beef cooked by a roadside chef be worth 1 silver coin per cube? We're the largest rotisserie in Rodu, so there's no way that he'll be able to compete with us. All of the chef's eyes lit up upon hearing this. Ike was right, how could one man compare to an entire kitchen of chefs when it came to a contest of most customers served? Word of Mag's roast meat soon spread throughout the entire Renhe food street, attracting many customers to the scene. However, the restriction of 1 cube per person was an extremely torturous one for all of the customers. Some customers were still trying to convince the owner of the stall to change his policy, but most of the customers had already given up. However, none of them strayed far from the stall, and there were even some who were advertising Mag's roast meat in his stead. They weren't doing this because they had been touched by Mag's food and were trying to spread this joy to the rest of the food street, they were instead simply trying to derive a twisted sense of pleasure from watching others suffer due to Mag's 1 cube per person policy. They had already fallen into this trap, so they could only cheer themselves up by luring more people into the trap with them. In the face of the countless requests for extra cubes of beef, Mag's response remained firm and consistent, not making any exceptions for anyone. Sinclair wasn't planning to try and persuade Mag anymore. Instead, he was beginning to support Mag's policy. He had initially been worried that Mag's cold and aloof attitude would result in a loss of customers, but looking at the massive line gathered in front of the stall, it was quite apparent that his concerns were completely unwarranted. In fact, Mag's policy was only working to bring more customers to the stall with the limited amount of beef they had. The feeling of dominating the food street was an extremely exhilarating one, and even Sinclair was getting swept up by the occasion, though he wasn't the one cooking. Meanwhile, the employee from Carey's rotisserie was completely dumbstruck. He was drawing one line after another with his feather quill in his hand, and he was barely able to believe his own eyes. His hand was throbbing slightly from drawing so many lines, but there were still relentless waves of customers flocking to the stall. We're not going to lose, are we? Even the rotisserie employee was losing confidence. The middle-aged man in lavish robes disembarked from his horse-drawn carriage and looked on with a curious expression. What's that stall selling? Why does it have such a long line of customers? I'll go have a look, Duke, a man who appeared to be a butler replied before quickly making his way over to Mag's stall. After a while, he squeezed his way out of the crowd again and smoothed out his slightly disheveled clothes as he respectfully informed, Duke, that stall is selling roast beef, and they're selling it in cubes. 1 cube costs 1 silver coin, and each person is only allowed to purchase a single cube. He's selling beef in cubes and each person can only have one? I've never heard of anything like that before. A bewildered look appeared on the man's face. He looked at the massive crowd gathered around the roast meat stall, and smiled as he said, "Judging from how eager these customers are, the roast beef here must be very delicious. Why don't we go and have a taste, Ken?" "Duke, someone of your status shouldn't be eating at a roadside stall," began the butler who was being referred to as Ken with a reluctant expression. "I don't care where I eat, all I care about is that I want to eat roast beef today. The roast beef from Carey's rotisserie isn't bad, but perhaps this roadside stall will give me a pleasant surprise." The Duke walked straight into the crowd despite Ken's objections. "Duke," Ken and another guard with a saber strapped to his waist walked on either side of the man, trying to disperse the crowd in order to create a path for the Duke. "We're here to eat, so we're normal customers, just like everyone else." The Duke shook his head to stop his butler before joining the end of the line. The customers nearby were all quite surprised to see this Duke in lavish robes. Nobles normally wouldn't ever stoop as low as to dine at roadside stalls with commoners, as that was seen by them to be a personal insult. However, this Duke appeared to be quite amicable, and didn't possess the snobbish demeanor that most nobles exhibited. "This aroma really is quite alluring." The Duke's eyes lit up with anticipation as he inhaled the aroma wafting through the air. The line slowly progressed forward, and the praise coming from all of the customers who had already tasted the beef made everyone else in the line even more eager to sink their teeth into Mag's roast meat. Finally, it was the Duke's turn, and he smiled as he said, "Boss, please get me a cube of beef." "Sure." Mag quickly stabbed a toothpick into a cube of beef on the roasting rack before handing it to the Duke. The employee from Carey's rotisserie scribbled another line onto the paper in a mechanical manner. However, after catching sight of this customer, his eyes widened as he exclaimed, "Duke Abraham! We pay our respects to Duke Abraham." All of the customers nearby were alerted to this man's identity upon hearing the employee's cry of surprise, and they hurriedly extended respectful salutes to this Duke Abraham. "Even Duke Abraham is coming to this street-side stall for roast beef, could it be that the owner is actually a renowned chef? Duke Abraham is a very important man. If he wants to eat more than one cube of beef, surely there's no way that Boss Mag can refuse him." "You're right. This is a duke, after all. If the owner turns him down, he probably won't live past today. Does that mean we'll also all get a chance to have a second cube of beef?" All of the customers were discussing quietly among themselves with excitement etched on their faces. The employee standing at the entrance of Carey's rotisserie hurriedly ran into the restaurant to report this news. "So it's Duke Abraham." Mag looked up with a slightly surprised expression upon hearing this. Mag had some recollection of this Duke from Alex's memories. Duke Abraham smiled at everyone before opening his mouth to take a bite out of his cube of roast beef. Among the 10 great dukes of the Roth Empire, Abraham wasn't the most powerful one, but he was most definitely the one who had tried out the most types of cuisine. He could have accepted a vast territory to rule over outside of Rodu, but he insisted on staying in the capital as he couldn't bear to be away from all of the delicious cuisine here. No other place could match the food capital in his heart. As such, he had been secretly given the nickname, Duke Foodie. However, he wasn't insulted by this title at all. Instead, he saw it as a badge of honor. There was nothing as important as delicious cuisine in this world, so he saw nothing wrong with making it his lifelong pursuit. As soon as he chewed the cube of roast beef Mag had handed to him, he felt as if he had found the true meaning of life. This was what he had been searching tirelessly for. After chewing into the tender beef, the delicious juices of the meat spread through his mouth, stirring his taste buds into a wild frenzy. A unique aroma then slowly proliferated over his palate, that was the flavor of black pepper, and it elevated the flavor of the beef to a whole new level. Even though it had only taken him mere seconds to devour the tiny cube of beef, he felt as if an entire century had already passed. It had been a very long time since he had tasted something so delicious that it made him forget about everything else. This is absolutely incredible. I don't have the words to describe just how delicious this roast meat is. Abraham gave Mag a thumbs up as awe and wonder flashed through his eyes. To him, a chef capable of cooking delicious food was like a skilled craftsman. They were just as worthy of praise and respect. Please give me 10 more cubes of beef, boss, Abraham requested eagerly. It's finally here. All of the customers' eyes lit up. Mag had just turned down everyone else, so no one had managed to get a second cube of beef from him. However, the one making the request now was Duke Abraham. Was Mag going to make an exception? Father doesn't ever make exceptions, Amy murmured to herself as she shook her little head. Irina turned her gaze toward Mag, and she thought to herself, is he still just as stubborn as ever? My apologies, Duke Abraham, but each person can only purchase 1 cube of beef. Mag shook his head with a firm smile. He wasn't going to change the rules he'd established for anyone. He turned down Duke Abraham. All of the customers were completely dumbstruck. They didn't think that a roadside vendor would turn down a high and mighty Duke. He really is just as stubborn as ever. A faint smile appeared on Irina's face. Boss Mag, this is Duke Abraham. He's a Duke, for heaven's sake. Sinclair tugged on Mag's sleeve with an urgent expression as sweat poured down his face. Was Mag not afraid of being beheaded for his insolence? Ken looked at Mag with a stern expression, and said, do you know whom you're speaking to? How dare you bring up your rules when you're speaking with Duke Abraham? My rules weren't established for Duke Abraham, nor will they be changed for Duke Abraham. The reason I made this rule is because I have a running bet with Kyrie's rotisserie, so I hope you may forgive me. Mag's expression remained calm and collected. Ken. Abraham raised his hand toward Ken with an expression of disapproval before turning to Mag with a smile as he asked, I don't know what kind of bet you have with Kyrie's rotisserie, but if you can't sell me 10 more cubes of beef, can you at least sell me 1 more? This Duke was quite pleasant and amicable, which was quite uncharacteristic of a noble, so Mag decided to explain the situation to him. After hearing Mag's account, Abraham nodded with an approving look. He glanced at Kyrie's rotisserie before turning back to Mag with a smile as he said, I see. I really agree with your opinion, it would be a tragedy if even food was split up into a hierarchical system. After all, there are many roadside stalls that sell exceptional food. Seeing as you have a bet with Kyrie's rotisserie, then it wouldn't be right for me to insist that you make an exception. Abraham then pointed at Ken and his personal guard as he asked, however, these two can buy a cube of beef each, right? They've lined up to get to this point, so of course they can. Mag nodded with a smile. Thus, Abraham departed with 2 more cubes of roast beef and a content expression on his face. An avid foodie like him was always able to find a way. Ken hurried along behind Abraham with a rather perplexed look, and asked, Duke, weren't you going to dine at Kyrie's rotisserie today? Why? Do they have roast meat that's even more delicious than this? Abraham smiled as he answered Ken's question with one of his own. Ken didn't know how to respond to that. It doesn't matter what dish it is, once you've tasted the best, you can never settle for second best again. Abraham looked at the 2 cubes of roast beef in his hands, and sighed. Looks like I won't ever be able to develop an interest in any other restaurant's roast beef again. Thank heavens Duke Abraham is a reasonable man. Sinclair wiped the cold sweat off his forehead, feeling as if his heart were about to jump out of his mouth. He took a glance at Mag to gauge his reaction, only to discover that he was as cool as a cucumber. So the owner only established this rule because he made a bet with Kyrie's rotisserie. Everything makes sense now. Even Duke Abraham chose to abide by his rules. We have no hope. Yes, but Duke Abraham also showed us a loophole in the system. I'm going to pay people to line up for cubes of beef for me. All of the customers wore rather complex expressions. They were hoping that Duke Abraham would play the antagonist and force Mag to change his rules, thereby giving everyone else a chance. However, they didn't think that Duke Abraham would be so benevolent. However, the vast majority of bystanders were all commoners, and they had always been opposed to the signs plastered outside the noble exclusive restaurants. As such, they were very supportive of what Mag was doing, and no one caused any more trouble for him. So you're saying Duke Abraham was very pleased with that man's roast meat, and he left right after eating it? Ike's expression had darkened considerably as he heard the report being delivered by the rotisserie employee. Duke Abraham was one of their most esteemed customers, as well as one of their most regular customers. He was a major driving force behind the popularity of the rotisserie, as many royals had been drawn to this restaurant by him. However, Duke Abraham had immediately left after eating some roast meat from a roadside stall without even entering Carey's rotisserie, and that was unacceptable to Ike. The employee continued, "Also, Rourke just told me that the stall has already served 135 customers, and the line in front of the still is only continuing to grow. They've served over 100 customers in less than an hour. At this rate, they're going to catch up to the rate of customers being served at our rotisserie." All of the previously confident chefs were now growing very concerned. Ike forced himself to calm down as he waved a hand, and said, "Let's speed up in our cooking and strive to serve as many customers as we can during peak hours." A massive long line had gathered outside Carey's rotisserie, extending almost as far as the eyes could see, creating a spectacle that drew the attention of many passers-by on the food street. What was even more surprising to them was the fact that this line wasn't extending out of Carey's rotisserie. Instead, everyone was lining up in front of a small roadside stall. Irina and Amy made a trip along the entire food street, and they came back just in time to see Mag handing off the final cube of beef to a customer. "My apologies, everyone, but we've sold all of the beef that we have for today." Mag extended an apology toward the customers in the line, and then glanced down at his watch before turning to the employee from Carey's rotisserie as he announced, "It's already 5 p.m., I've won." All of the customers who had yet to taste Mag's roast meat groaned in unison. However, they gradually fell silent upon hearing Mag's confident declaration. The bet between Mag and Carey's rotisserie was already common knowledge to almost everyone on the food street. It was already quite astounding that such an obscure roadside stall would dare to challenge the most renowned rotisserie on the food street, and everyone was even more astonished to hear that even Duke Abraham had visited the stall. Not only that, but he left without entering Carey's rotisserie after tasting Mag's roast beef, which was a clear indication of who he thought cooked better roast beef. Now, Mag was declaring his victory, and everyone turned toward the employee from Carey's rotisserie in unison. The employee was panicking slightly from having so many people looking at him, and he stuttered, Why you don't know how many customers our rotisserie served, so how can you say you won? You're spouting nonsense." Right at this moment, Ike emerged from Carey's rotisserie with a triumphant and arrogant look on his face. "Humph, how dare a lowly chef like you make such a bold declaration? Our rotisserie served a total of 735 customers this afternoon. How can you even imagine to compete with us?" The peak dinner hours hadn't even arrived yet, but Carey's rotisserie was already packed to the rafters. There was no way that a roadside stall could compare with them. "Head chef." The employee immediately fled to Ike's side. He regained his confidence, and also turned to Mag with a smug look on his face. 735? As expected, Carey's rotisserie really is the best rotisserie on the food street. All of the roadside vendors wore expressions of awe and envy. They couldn't serve 700 customers even if they were to run their stands for an entire day without rest. Is Boss Mag going to lose? All of the previously confident customers turned to Mag with concern in their eyes. "Father has never lost before." Amy's expression was completely devoid of concern. Irina nodded in agreement. "He's my man, so there's no way he could possibly lose." Mag turned to Ike with a calm smile, and said, "You actually served 736 customers if you count that baby that came with his parents. However, I sold a total of 1,472 cubes of beef today, and each person is only permitted to have 1 cube of beef, so I served 1,472 customers, exactly twice the number of customers you served. The entire scene fell completely silent as everyone gawked at Mag in disbelief. How is that even possible? He served 1,472 customers in less than 5 hours? That has to be some kind of record, a roadside vendor exclaimed with an alarmed expression. Meanwhile, elated smiles appeared on all of the customers' faces. They had all contributed to the final figure of 1,472, so they were also a part of this bet, and Mag's victory struck them with a sense of achievement and vindication. Ike's triumphant smile immediately stiffened as he glared at Mag, and yelled. No. That's impossible. You're only one person, how could you have served so many customers in 5 hours? You're lying. Mag pointed to the rotisserie employee with a calm expression, and said, I asked him to draw a line for every customer that bought a cube of beef from me. If you don't believe me, you can count the lines on his sheet of paper. Everyone turned toward the sheet of paper in the employee's hand in unison. Sure enough, it really was filled with countless small lines, and everyone internally praised Mag for his resourcefulness. Now, Ike had no choice but to admit his defeat. Ike looked at the sheet of paper. He obviously wasn't actually going to count every single line, but he could already tell that there were definitely more than 1,000 lines drawn there, so his expression immediately darkened. Head chef, the employee's voice was trembling, and he was on the verge of tears. The sheet of paper in his hand was like a hot potato that he wanted to toss out, but he was afraid that doing so would result in dire consequences, so he could only hold onto it as if he were holding a ticking time bomb. Give me that! Ike strode forward and grabbed the sheet of paper before ripping it into shreds and tossing it onto the ground. He then turned to Mag with a cold smile as he scoffed, How are you going to prove that you served over 1,000 guests now? Are you going to get these commoners to serve as your witnesses? A lowly chef like you is only worthy to serve your putrid roast meat to these lowly commoners. I can stomp you into the ground with ease. You'll never guess who's actually the one standing behind Carrie's rotisserie. A wild and arrogant smile appeared on Ike's face as he waved a hand to summon a bunch of weapon-brandishing chefs and employees. Beat the crap out of him. How dare you try to hurt Father? Amy glowered at the people charging toward Mag as she picked up the little chair she had been sitting on. Irina had also picked up an adult-sized chair, and she glared at these people as she said, These people should all die. Is this enough proof for you? Right at this moment, a calm voice sounded from within the crowd as the shreds of paper that had been hurled onto the ground flew into the air before reverting back to their original form. The crowd parted to allow a tall and thin man in black robes to stride forward. He extended a hand and the sheet of paper fluttered into his grasp, looking as if it were in perfect condition and had never been torn before. What powerful spatial magic! Someone exclaimed from upstairs. It's Grandpa Principal. Amy was ecstatic as she placed her little chair back onto the ground and adopted a harmless expression. Irina also tossed her chair to the side as she pursed her lips, and murmured to herself, Looks like old man Novan is just as much of a show-off as ever. All of the bystanders immediately backed away even further. It was quite clear that this was a powerful magic caster. Mag was rather surprised to see Novan here, but he still greeted, Hello there, Principal Novan. All of the people from Carrie's rotisserie also faltered upon seeing this. They could stomp a street-side vendor into the ground with ease, but they didn't dare to offend a powerful magic caster. Ike glanced at the Magus Tower crest emblazoned on Novan's robes, and he mustered up his courage as he threatened in a cold voice, Who are you? This has nothing to do with you, so you'd better back off. This is Rodu and there are people here that you can't afford to mess with. Right at this moment, a cold voice sounded. Shut up. Do you know that the man you're speaking to is the most powerful spatial magic caster on the entire Norland continent, and that the chef you just insulted will be cooking for His Majesty during his birthday banquet? The crowd parted once again to reveal a lavish unicorn-drawn carriage. There was a man in a set of luxurious blue and purple robes disembarking from the carriage, and he wore a cold expression on his face. "It's the second prince!" A surprised yell erupted from within the crowd, creating quite stir among the bystanders. "Did I hear that right? The prince is saying that this man is the most powerful spatial magic caster on the continent, and that chef will be cooking for the king on his birthday. Does that mean the roast beef we had today was cooked by a royal chef? I can brag about this for an entire year." "Only a year? Heck, I'll be bragging about this for the rest of my life." The entire crowd had erupted into a frenzy upon hearing Josh's proclamation. W. Sinclair stared at Mag with wide eyes, unable to articulate his emotions with his limited vocabulary. This was like if a man were living in a slum and someone asked to stay in their house for a night, only for them to wake up the next time morning and tell the owner of the house that he was the king. For a chef like him, a man that could cook for the king was the king among all chefs. He didn't know how to react anymore. This was truly a day that was filled with surprises. After hearing Josh's words, Ike's face immediately paled as his legs gave out under him, and he collapsed to his knees. He turned his gaze toward the calm and collected Mag, and couldn't comprehend why a chef who was good enough to cook for the king would make a bet with him for the sake of these lowly commoners. Was he doing this as a practical joke? This is bullying. Ike was struck by the urge to burst into tears. He looked on as Josh approached him from his carriage, and a sense of horror began to well up in his heart. There was a great magic caster present, as well as a chef who was going to cook for the king. These two were both countless times more important than him, and he couldn't think of any way to weasel his way out of this situation. Why is he here? A slightly urgent look appeared in Mag's eyes as he turned his gaze toward Irina, only to find that she was already nowhere to be found, and he heaved an internal sigh of relief. He didn't know whether Irina had already guessed his and Amy's identity, but he could tell from her actions that she didn't really trust Josh, either. From the information that he had gathered, he knew that Irina and Josh had once shared a close friendship, and he was glad to see that this was no longer the case. Irina stood in front of the window of an obscure booth as she murmured to herself, "Josh, what have you done behind my back? If I find out that you played a role in that incident 3 years ago, I will kill you with my own 2 hands." Mag withdrew his gaze and turned to Josh, and then directed his attention to the trembling Ike. It appeared that this rotisserie most likely had something to do with Josh. Could it be that he was the true owner of the rotisserie? "Your Highness," Ike was sprawled to the ground, not daring to raise his head. "Principal Novan, I didn't think that you'd have arrived in Rodu already. I was going to pay you a visit and ask you some questions about my magic, so I'm glad to see you here." Josh completely ignored Ike as he strode toward Novan and extended a student's salute. He then turned to Ike with a cold expression, and condemned, "For this filthy swine's display of insolence, I'm going to banish him from Rodu forever." Ike's expression changed drastically as he kowtowed over and over again while pleading, "Your Highness. Please forgive me, Your Highness, there's no need for that, Your Highness." He did indeed overstep his boundaries, but his crimes aren't punishable by banishment. If you banish him from Rodu, he and his entire family would be cast into grave danger outside these city walls. That would be a tragedy. Novan looked at Ike and shook his head with a sympathetic expression as he said, "Boss Mag cooked roast meat for 5 hours straight here just so he could remove the sign plastered on the doors of this rotisserie. If you can get rid of all of the signs of this nature on the entire food street, you'll be vindicating Boss Mag's efforts, and I'm sure all of the commoners will thank you for it. You're as kind as always, Principal Nova. However, this swine has insulted Mr. Mag in an extremely atrocious manner. What would you like to do with him, Mr. Mag?" Josh turned his gaze toward Mag. A hint of elation jade had just appeared in Ike's eyes, but it was instantly replaced by despair. He knew just how much he had offended Mag, so there was no way that Mag would let him off the hook. He is indeed quite a detestable character. Mag picked up a chair and swung it directly into Ike's face. The chair was cracked slightly by the impact amid before it was tossed aside. Mag then turned to Josh with a smile, and continued, "However, I've also vented my rage now. It's just as Principal Novan has suggested, if you can eradicate all of the signs on this entire food street, it'll obviously be much more effective than if I were to go around tearing signs off one by one." As expected, striking someone with a chair really was very satisfying. The woozy Ike's eyes immediately lit up as a spark of hope lit up in his heart once again. Even though his face was stinging with pain, his heart was filled with joy. Josh glanced at the chair, which had remained largely unscathed, and he smiled as he said, "You're also quite a kind man, Mr. Mag. In that case, I'll make the decision here and now to eradicate the customer restrictions imposed by the restaurants on this food street. From now on, noble exclusive restaurants will cease to exist. Long live the prince!" A burst of cheers immediately erupted from the crowd. This was a victory for all commoners. Josh also wore a smile on his face. He had just won a lot of support from the citizens of Rodu without actually doing much at all. As for this swine, he doesn't deserve to be a chef. "Even if I don't banish you from Rodu, you're prohibited from working as a chef in a restaurant," Josh said as he glared coldly at Ike. "Thank you for your kindness, Your Highness," Ike kowtowed once again. He was extremely fortunate to even be able to remain in Rodu. "I've only just run off to the toilet for a bit, but it appears that many things have happened during that time. Did our second prince do something praiseworthy again?" A voice tinged with a hint of mockery sounded as Krasuo approached with Amy from behind them. He turned to Novan with a smile, and asked, "Glad to see you here, care for a drink?" "Master Krasuo." Josh extended a respectful salute before turning to Amy with a surprised smile as he remarked, "So Mr. Mag's daughter is Master Krasuo's new disciple. Do you really expect me to think that you didn't know about this in advance? Your acting skills are rather shoddy, Josh. If you don't have anything useful to say, I have to take everyone out for drinks now." Krasuo gave a dismissive wave before turning to leave. "Looks like I still won't get the opportunity to have a drink with Master Krasuo and Principal Novan. I hope you all enjoy yourselves." Josh was not enraged in the slightest by Krasuo's dismissal as he turned to Mag with a smile, and reminded, "I hope you won't forget about the birthday banquet tomorrow, though, Mr. Mag." The crowd in front of Kairi's rotisserie gradually dispersed, while Josh's orders to abolish the existence of noble exclusive restaurants spread through the entire food street like wildfire. It was said that a legendary chef had set up a small stall, defeating the entire Kairi's rotisserie with his individual cooking prowess. This story had been sensationalized into many different editions, each one more spectacular and more thrilling than the previous one. However, regardless of which edition was being told, the chef in the story had been cemented as a hero, one that fought for respect and equality for all commoners. Thus, the name of a certain Mamie restaurant began to circulate throughout the foodie circle of Rodu. Many people were simply unable to forget the delectable roast beef they had tasted, and were beginning to try and track down this restaurant. However, no one was able to discover any information about this restaurant, let alone find out its address. Thankfully, it was said that this mysterious chef was going to be cooking for the king during his birthday banquet coming up on the next day, so more information should be disclosed on that occasion. After all, his roast beef had received glowing praise from Duke Abraham, so there was no way that he would disappear just like that. The elation of the commoners was intermingled with a less than joyful reaction from the owners of the noble exclusive restaurants. The restaurants that had commoner prohibition signs plastered onto their doors were all restaurants that had no lack of customers. For restaurants like those, the noble exclusive policy was very desirable as patronage exclusively from nobles could bring them additional benefits outside of monetary gain. However, no one dared to oppose the prince's orders. After all, the head chef of Kairi's rotisserie had already been made into an example to intimidate everyone, so no restaurant owners dared to try their luck. All of them were lamenting their ill fortune and considering how they were going to respond to the displeasure of the nobles. Congratulations on completing the mission, a stinky tofu recipe has already been delivered. The system's voice sounded within Mag's mind as he sat in a street-side booth, followed by the emergence of a shimmering golden experience bag. Stinky tofu, eh? That's a dish that everyone loves to hate. Mag fell into deep thought as he looked at the experience bag. I didn't think you'd have such strong tastes, the system mocked. Mag ignored the system as he thought to himself, stinky tofu is one of the kings of street food known for its distinct putrid aroma, so it's much more suited to being sold in an outdoor stall rather than in an enclosed restaurant. Those who love stinky tofu swear by it, yet those who hate it are inclined to puke at the mere sight of it. Such a polarizing dish with such a powerful and distinct aroma was not very suitable to be placed onto the restaurant's menu. Even Mag himself wasn't sure that he would be able to handle staying in the kitchen if it smelled like stinky tofu all day long. It would be a massive waste not to learn such a classic dish, but it's really not suited to be sold in the restaurant. It would be best to set up a roadside stall to sell it, Mag contemplated. This was quite an interesting predicament for him to face. Father, are you thinking about big sister Irina? Amy swayed Mag's arm from side to side. Mag returned to his senses as he turned his gaze toward Amy. I can tell that you've been thinking about something ever since big sister Irina left. Amy looked at Mag with a knowing smile as she said, it's all right, big sister Irina told me that she would come back to see me. When she does, I'll take you along with me, so you'll have to work hard. Mag didn't know whether he should laugh or cry about Amy's insistence on playing matchmaker for him and Irina. Big sister Irina told me to keep an eye on you and get other women to stay away from you, that means she also likes you. Amy whispered into Mag's ear. Mag's eyelids twitched upon hearing this. He didn't think that Irina would try to plant a spy right next to him like this. So you're on her side now? Of course not. I'm on your side, Father. Amy shook her head firmly. Mag heaved a faint sigh of relief. Thankfully, Amy hadn't completely crossed over to the dark side. However, big sister Irina is a good person, so you can't hurt her, Father. That's why I'll be keeping an eye on you for her, and I'll use fireballs to burn any woman who approaches you with bad intentions. Amy said with a serious expression. As expected of Amy's mother, they've only been together for one afternoon, and she already has Amy wrapped around her finger. A resigned look appeared on Mag's face as he nodded, all right, I'll do as you say. Yay! Amy clapped her little hands together in a joyful manner. It would be great if Father and big sister Irina can live together. When Mother comes back, we'll all be one big happy family. Krasu and Novan had gone out for a while, and they only returned after all of the dishes had arrived onto the table. Mag was rather curious what they had done while they were away, but he could sense that their short detour had been more meaningful than a simple trip to the toilet or something of such mundane nature. The dishes they had ordered gave Mag a few pleasant surprises. This was the most renowned restaurant on the entire food street, and their signature roast chicken was quite exquisite as were their other dishes. They were on an entirely different level compared to the restaurants in Chaos City. Looks like it won't be easy to become the god of cookery of the Norland continent. Mag picked up a dessert food that was as transparent as crystal, and held it up in front of his eyes for careful examination. However, he was also filled with confidence at the same time. He had been chosen by God, and failure was not an option for him. As such, he had to walk down this path to the very end. Novan put down his chopsticks, and turned to Mag with a smile as he asked, Boss Mag, is this your first time in Rodu? Mag hesitated momentarily before nodding with a smile as he replied, kind of. What do you think of Rodu compared to Chaos City? Novan asked. Mag thought about this carefully before replying, Chaos City epitomizes the concept of equality, a concept which is nothing more than a distant dream for the commoners of Rodu. That point alone makes me prefer Chaos City over Rodu. A gratified smile appeared on Novan's face as he sighed. The path to equality is just as grand as it is arduous. Even Chaos City is far away from reaching true equality. True equality doesn't exist so long as human nature remains. After all, who can truly be selfless enough to treat everyone else as equal to themselves? Mag shook his head in response. Novin's eyes lit up as he smiled, and said, "You really are an interesting man, Mr. Mag." He then hesitated momentarily before adopting a serious expression as he continued, "Mr. Mag, do you think the continent should be united or divided?" "Are you serious, Principal Novin? You're asking a chef whether the continent should be divided or unified?" Mag's eyelids twitched as he looked at Novin's serious expression. He felt as if here were a primary school student being scrutinized by the principal. After carefully contemplating the question, Mag cleared his throat, and replied, "In my opinion, the continent will go through a constant cycle where unification will give way to division, and vice versa. Everything will follow the natural order and cannot be swayed by one man, let alone be predicted by a chef like me." "A constant cycle, Novin repeated to himself before suddenly bursting into laughter as he said, "Haha, who would have thought that your insight would be much wiser than that of old men like me? Indeed, the natural order is not something that can be defied by any single man. Looks like the continent is going to be plunged into turmoil soon." Krasu heaved a faint sigh as he took a sip of wine, seemingly in rather low spirits. Mag looked at the two of them, and didn't say anything further. He also had a feeling that a major event was going to take place soon. Could it have something to do with the king's birthday banquet scheduled for the next day? Only Amy was joyfully enjoying the dishes on her table, stuffing food relentlessly down her mouth as if her little stomach could hold an entire elephant. Following the conclusion of the meal, Krasu and Novin departed, while Mag and Amy returned to the second prince's manor on the horse-drawn carriage. Along the way, the coach driver who had been knocked out by Irina earlier in the day carefully inquired Mag about what had happened. Mag naturally blamed it on Sean and his rhinoceros-drawn carriage, thereby diverting the center of attention away from Irina and pinning the blame on Sean. Josh and Sean were already sworn enemies, and this latest incident would serve to stoke the flames of their mutual enmity. However, that was not something for Mag to be concerned about. All he had to worry about was cooking for the king the next day. Mag knew that the king was a fan of sweet foods, so aside from the grilled fish, steak, and braised chicken, he had also prepared a final trump card, his ice cream cake. After brushing her teeth, Amy lay down on her bed with her head resting on Mag's arm. She looked up at Mag with her large bright eyes, and whispered, "Father, big sister Irina told me that she knew Mother, and that Mother was the most beautiful elf in the entire elven race, is that true?" "She sure is modest." Mag rolled his eyes internally, but he nodded with a gentle smile as she replied, "That's right, your mother is the most beautiful elf in the entire world, just as beautiful as Irina." "Hehe, you told me you didn't like big sister Irina, but you were lying, weren't you?" A smug smile appeared on Amy's face. Mag smiled, and answered her question with one of his own. "Do you like her, Amy?" "Of course I do." Amy immediately nodded with a smile on her face as she said, "When she hugged me, I felt like I was being hugged by Mother. It was so warm and comfortable, completely different from when I'm being hugged by Teacher Luna or Big Sister Yabimiya." A sweet smile appeared on Amy's little face, and she slowly closed her eyes before falling asleep. "That's because she really is your mother." Mag gently planted a kiss on her forehead before also closing his eyes. "Xiaomi. Amy. She's such an adorable and thoughtful little girl, but I've never had a child before, how should I live with her in the future? I heard that there are many people abducting children nowadays, should I tie her on a leash? I heard all little kids are really picky with their food, will she dislike my cooking?" I heard, within an intricately crafted room, a gorgeous figure sat on the windowsill, murmuring to herself with a concerned look on her face. On the border of the wind forest, a beautiful elf emerged from a bush with her hands on her hips. She had a rather cross expression on her face as she murmured to herself, "It's been 16 days. Have those bastards really cancelled the deal? There were leaves all over her hair and body, and her dress was rather dirty and in disarray. She also had a pair of dark circles around her eyes, and the exhaustion on her face was quite apparent. Tomorrow will be the king's birthday, and Princess Irina has already gone to Rodu. If they haven't cancelled the deal, then it'll most likely be taking place soon. The elf took a glance in the direction of the wind forest, and a determined look reappeared on her face as she turned and disappeared into the dense forestry. In the study of the second prince's manor, Josh stood behind his desk with his brows furrowed as he mused, looks like Sean is also suspecting Mag's identity, which is why he deliberately crashed into my manor's horse-drawn carriage. I bet he wasn't expecting Irina and Krasua to be on the carriage, though. Seuss had already returned to Rodu. In his coarse voice, he replied, "Your Highness, we are still unable to verify that man's identity, and he really is very suspicious. Could it be that he truly is Alex in disguise? Do you think that Alex would sell roast meat at a roadside stall for an entire afternoon just so he could rip a sign off a restaurant? Do you think Alex could possibly be such an exceptional chef? That's indeed rather implausible." The next day, Mag woke up bright and early. After dressing Amy and helping her brush her teeth, he heard the sound of knocking on the door. He opened the door to find the butler from the day before standing outside, looking at him with a smile as he said, "Are you ready, Mr. Mag? I'm here to take you and your daughter to the royal palace." Amy as well. Mag was rather surprised to hear this. He was only a chef, after all, and it was clearly inappropriate for a chef to bring a family member along with them into the royal palace. He had already made preparations to leave Amy behind in the second prince's manor for a day. The butler's expression became even more respectful as he explained, "His Highness told me that Master Krasua is insisting on taking young Mistress Amy to the palace as his disciple." The second prince was very close with the Magus Tower, so he was naturally already aware that Amy had defeated Kola and was a 4-year-old 5th-tier magic caster. A child of her extraordinary talent was sure to become a legendary figure one day. Mag nodded as an enlightened look appeared on his face. Indeed, it certainly wouldn't be an issue for a man of Krasua's prestige to take his disciple to attend the king's birthday banquet. On the horse-drawn carriage, Amy turned to Mag, and whispered, "Father, will we be seeing Big Sister Irina today?" "We probably will." Mag nodded before whispering, "Little Amy, make sure you pretend not to know Big Sister Irina all that well when we get to the palace." "Don't worry, Father, I know what to do. Big Sister Irina is so beautiful, so there must be a lot of people who want to marry her. If they know that Father also wants to marry her, they'll be very angry at Father, so we both have to pretend not to know Big Sister Irina," Amy analyzed with her bizarre logic. "Good girl." Mag patted Amy's little head with a rather peculiar expression. After the horse-drawn carriage stopped within the Grand Royal Palace, Mag and Amy opened the carriage's curtain, only to be immediately greeted by the sight of a statue of a birdman that was about as tall as a grown man. "What an ugly bird! That really scared me." Amy reflexively kicked the wooden statue flying. The wooden statue was sent flying for over 3 meters by Amy's kick, crashing to the ground where it crushed a large patch of flowers and made a large crater in the garden. "Your Highness! Are you all right, Your Highness? Hurry up and get His Highness out of that thing." A bunch of people rushed forward and scurried around, trying to prise off the birdman's head. Mag and Amy looked on with dumbstruck expressions at the sight of the birdman statue on the ground. Its golden wings had been carved in an extremely vivid and lifelike manner, with each and every feather completely independent of each other, and all of them were shimmering with a faint metallic hue under the sunlight. The bird's beak and eyes had also been exquisitely carved, and the craftsmanship really was quite exceptional. However, it was indeed quite a jarring sight to see such a massive bird standing at the center of the royal palace in a completely stationary manner, so it was no wonder that Amy had been startled to the point of kicking it flying. If Mag had been the one to emerge from the carriage first, then he would also most likely have done the same thing. However, Mag suddenly realized something upon seeing the panicked guards running around like headless chickens. Your Highness? Could it be that the carpenter third prince is in that wooden statue? Alex had very few memories of this third prince, as the latter was completely obsessed with carpentry and woodwork, and had absolutely zero interest in inheriting the throne. In fact, he never attended any events unless his attendance was strictly mandatory. There were even many people who had already forgotten that the Roth Empire even had a third prince. His talent is extraordinary. As expected, he really isn't cut out to be a prince, Mag praised internally at the sight of the exquisitely crafted wooden statue. Stop! Stop! Which idiot is trying to tear my head off? I'm going to be decapitated if you keep that up. A slightly tender and youthful voice sounded. There were two people currently in the process of pulling at the head of the wooden statue, and they hurriedly stopped what they were doing, allowing the bird's head to clunk onto the ground. Ugh! A pained groan sounded from within the bird. Your Highness! The two men hurriedly picked up the bird's head again. That's enough. Just help me up first, you idiots! A resigned voice sounded from within the bird's head. The guards hurriedly helped the birdman to his feet. Amy hadn't held back at all with that kick, and several of the feathers on the birdman's chest had been cracked, along with a few feathers on his back. Some parts had also been stained by the grass and mud, making it appear like a ruined artistic masterpiece. Capture them at once! The leader of the guards waved a hand, and several saber-wielding guards surrounded Mag's carriage to detain them. The butler who had brought Mag to the royal palace wore a tense expression as he said, "This is the chef that His Highness, the second prince, invited from Chaos City to cook for His Majesty. Please forgive them for this unfortunate accident." The butler had clearly also already realized that the man inside the Birdman statue could only be the third prince, and was feeling very flustered as a result. The second prince was quite powerful, and was heavily favored by the king, but the fact of the matter was that Amy had attacked the third prince, and that was a crime punishable by death. Furthermore, the second prince would definitely completely detach himself from the incident and cut all ties with Mag and his daughter in order to uphold his image. That could spell trouble for him as well. The leader of the guards strode forward and glared at the butler as he said, "Do you know whom you just attacked? Even if you are from the second prince's manor, all of you must be detained today. Let me see just who has the guts to attack His Highness, the third prince." But, the butler was at a loss for what to do. "Capture them at once," the leader of the guards repeated in a cold voice. All of the guards converged around the carriage, having already drawn their sabers. However, all of them were looking at Mag and Amy with cautious expressions on their faces. To be able to send the third prince flying with a single kick despite the fact that he was wearing his heavy wooden costume indicated that she possessed strength that was at least comparable to that of a second-tier knight. "I should have checked the horoscope before coming out today." Mag sighed internally as he shielded Amy with his body. He was contemplating whether he should bring up Krasua to intimidate these guards, but he didn't know if that would work in the royal palace. "Stand down, you idiots!" A grumpy voice sounded from within the bird's head. The birdman flapped his wings toward his belly a few times, looking like a maladroit penguin as he did so. He seemed to be trying to press something, but was unable to reach it, and was putting on a rather adorable display. The leader of the guards hesitated momentarily before indicating for the guards to get back for now. Meow Ugly Duckling looked on for a while before bursting into laughter in Amy's arms. "Look, father, that birdman is really ugly, but it's so funny." Amy also faltered momentarily before bursting into laughter. Mag also wore a rather peculiar expression on his face. The previously grand and imposing bird was now looking like an uncoordinated penguin, and it really was quite a hilarious sight to behold. Even the guards' faces were flushed as they struggled to suppress their mirth. The birdman skipped on the spot in a frustrated manner as he yelled, "What are you idiots looking at? Hurry up and get over here! Smooth down that feather that's jutting out on my stomach, and adjust my wings so they're straight again, I can't reach them. Ha ha ha, this is hilarious." Amy was laughing so vigorously that she almost flung Ugly Duckling into the air. Meanwhile, all of the guards rushed toward the birdman to smooth down his feathers and adjust his wings. Crack! Crack! Following two loud cracks, a slit opened up between the body and the head of the birdman, and a young man with a large head jumped out from within while clasping his hand over his bright red nose. The leader of the guards strode over with a concerned look, and asked, "Are you all right, Your Highness?" "Why wouldn't I be all right, you idiot? I only fell on my nose." The young man removed his hand from his nose and gave the guard a dismissive wave, only for blood to begin dripping down from his nostrils. "His Highness is bleeding. Hurry up and get a doctor." All of the guards were instantly thrown into a panicked frenzy again. "You really are a bunch of idiots, it's not like I'm going to die from a nosebleed." The young man pulled out a white handkerchief from his pocket and stuffed one of its corners up his nose. He then turned to Mag and Amy with furrowed brows and an intrigued look in his eyes as he said, "I don't recognize you two idiots, is this your first time here in the royal palace?" He then turned to Amy with a curious look, and asked, "And you there, you little idiot, you're not very old, but you sure have a keen eye. Why do you say my statue is ugly?" Amy shook her head as she looked at the young man, and said, "Little mushroom head, your head is really big, but your eyesight is really bad." Bad. This young man appeared to be around 14 to 15 years old, and there were a few freckles on his nose. His head was almost twice as big as that of a normal person of his height, yet his body was quite frail and delicate. He really did resemble a large mushroom, and Mag had to pretend to cough into his hand in order to hide his amusement. This young man was none other than the third prince of the Roth Empire, Yuri. Even though Alex had only met him on a few brief occasions, his peculiar appearance ensured that he remained clear in Alex's memories. Compared to 3 years ago, he had grown slightly taller, but his head was just as eye-catching and unforgettable as ever. There weren't that many people in this world who could leave such a strong and lasting first impression like he did. Insolence! How dare you invent such a rude nickname for His Highness, the guard leader scolded. Yuri raised a hand to silence him, and he didn't appear to have been irked by Amy's words at all. Instead, a curious look appeared on his face as he asked, "Little mushroom head? Do you know Big Sister Irina?" Mag raised his eyebrows, and he was suddenly struck by an ominous premonition. Amy glanced at Mag before shaking her head as she replied, "No, you two look quite similar. Both of you have silver hair and pointy ears." Yuri stroked his chin as he appraised Amy, and mused, "Big Sister Irina told me that if she ever had a daughter, she'd offer her daughter's hand to me in marriage." Before Amy had a chance to say anything, a dangerous look had appeared in Mag's eyes as he blurted out, "No, she didn't, don't spout nonsense." Any man who dared to lust after Amy was his enemy, even if it were just a young man raising a hypothetical scenario. If they were situated somewhere other than the royal palace, Mag might have drawn his sword already. Amy and Yuri both turned to Mag in unison. "Are you all right, father?" Amy asked with a perplexed look. "Are you rejecting me, big idiot?" Yuri was also rather befuddled. "Nothing of the sort. I just think that she was most likely only making a joke and never took it seriously." Mag concealed the dangerous light in his eyes. This was the royal palace, after all. However, he had made a mental note to himself to bring up this issue with Irina once they revealed their identities to her. Amy was still very young, so he absolutely refused to even consider marrying her off to anyone. If Yuri was going to force the issue, then he wouldn't mind making it so that there was one less prince in the Roth Empire. "Really? That's great." Yuri's eyes lit up as he patted his chest with a joyful expression, and said, "That promise has been constantly weighing down on me like a nightmare this entire time. Big Sister Irina is so violent and unreasonable, what kind of big idiot would want to marry her? Her daughter is probably just like her, so it would be great if she wasn't serious. In any case, woodworking is much more interesting than women." Mag was slightly taken aback by Yuri's reaction before a relieved and gratified look appeared on his face. I'm glad you're so dedicated to your craft, Your Highness. Looks like we'll be meeting again soon. I have to go and prepare another present for Father now. See you later, big idiot, little idiot. Yuri waved at Mag and Amy before rushing away. The guard leader glared at Mag, clearly unwilling to let him off the hook. However, he still hurriedly caught up to Yuri, and asked, Your Highness, you prepared that bird statue for so long, but it's broken now, what do we do? You bunch of idiots, I told you that the bird was really ugly, but you all tried to convince me otherwise. That little idiot finally told me the truth. Do you think it's appropriate that I give Father a present that's ugly and only good for frightening people? Yuri asked with a displeased look. The guards carrying the bird statue didn't dare to say anything, but all of them still wore concerned expressions. However, Yuri himself wasn't concerned in the slightest as he smiled, and murmured to himself, it's already too late to make something else from scratch, so it looks like I'll have to bring out my trump card. The guard leader's expression immediately became even more concerned as he whispered, Your Highness, that thing still hasn't been tested. If something goes wrong, what could go wrong, you idiot? Hurry up and come with me. We have to give it a quick paint job. Yuri quickened his pace, and all of the guards could only jog after him. Mag disembarked from the horse-drawn carriage and looked at Amy with a serious expression as he said, Amy, we can't go around attacking people in the royal palace, understood? Amy couldn't enter the kitchen, so the butler was going to take her to look for Krasu. All right. Amy nodded obediently. Good girl. Mag patted Amy's little head with a smile before turning to the butler as he said, I'll have to trouble you to take Amy to Master Krasu. Leave it to me. The butler hurriedly nodded as he wiped the cold sweat off his forehead before continuing onward with Amy in his horse-drawn carriage. The one sitting in the carriage was a baby-faced demon who dared to kick the third prince and give him such a derogatory nickname. That kick had almost ended his career, and potentially even his life. She was not someone he could mess with. Mag wasn't worried about Amy at all, seeing as she was going to be with Krasu. There weren't many people in this world who could hurt Amy right under Krasu's nose, and the fact that Novan was with them added an extra layer of security. He looked on as the horse-drawn carriage disappeared around the corner before turning his attention to the grand palace before him. As compared to looking at it from afar, seeing the royal palace up close presented an even more awe-inspiring visual stimulus. The palace buildings were constructed from massive stones and semi-transparent golden tiles that shimmered with a dazzling light under the sun. The people in front of the main palace were as tiny as ants in comparison, and it wouldn't be a surprise to anyone if this was actually a palace for giant dragons. Even though Mag had seen the Forbidden City in his past life. While that structure was also very spectacular, he was still awestruck by the sight of this grand palace in this alternate world. Please come with me, Mr. Mag. A carriage filled with all types of kitchenware and pre-marinated ingredients had been following their carriage this entire time. The driver disembarked before extending a respectful salute toward Mag. Mag withdrew his gaze and turned to the massive building with a huge plaque that read Royal Kitchen hanging above its doors. A smile appeared on his face, and he nodded as he replied, Sure. As he made his way toward the doors of the kitchen, Mag heard the sound of clanging kitchen utensils coming from inside the kitchen, and he could already imagine the bustling scenes within. This occasion was a competition between all of the top chefs of the Norland continent. Everyone was trying to earn the approval of the king, and the one who did so would be the winner of this unofficial contest. The guards at the entrance of the kitchen verified Mag's identity before pulling open the heavy doors, upon which the commotion within grew even louder. Outside the royal palace, within a dimly lit room, 3 tall and broad figures were seated together. The warriors of the Orc race have already spilled much blood on the border between the Orc tribe and the Roth Empire. I hope your demon race and forest troll race can actually show some sincerity this time rather than simply make empty promises, a green-skinned orc said in a solemn voice. The forest troll cracked the joints in its necks as it replied in an extremely coarse voice, "Don't worry, the most powerful troops of our forest troll race have already arrived at Rodu. This time, we'll make sure that Irina stays here forever." A cold light flashed through the spatial demon's crimson eyes as it chuckled. "Our three races will dictate the direction this world progresses in. The elves, humans, and goblins should know their place and resign themselves to acting as our food. They don't deserve to own territories, nor do they deserve to treat us as equals. Let's break them down from the inside." Mag carried his box of knives into the massive kitchen that was around as large as a soccer field. Despite the enormity of the kitchen, the entire place was almost completely stacked as there were over 1,000 chefs present. These were the most exceptional chefs on the Norland continent, and all of them had gathered here to offer up their most delicious dishes to the king. "It's more spectacular here than I imagined," Mag thought to himself. He glanced at a demon chef who was swinging 3 chef's knives through the air like the wind, then at a forest troll who had a pot sitting above the flames burning on his head, and then at an elven chef who was cooking as gracefully as if he were casting magic spells. Chefs from different races displayed unique and incredible cooking styles as all manners of delectable aromas wafted through the air. The sound of clanging kitchenware created a symphony that was music to every chef's ears. Mag looked around with an intrigued expression. This was the first time he had seen so many colleagues from so many diverse backgrounds, and he felt as if he were a small child in a candy shop. "Mr. Mag, this is your cooking station. The dishes will be brought out to the king in 2 hours, we hope you'll be ready by then." The guard that led Mag into the kitchen pointed at a cooking station before asking, "Are you here with anyone else?" Mag placed his box of knives onto the cooking bench before shaking his head with a hint of confusion on his face. "No, I'm alone." "Why do you ask?" "I'm just a little surprised, even dessert chefs have a few helpers with them, so I thought you'd at least have an assistant sous chef with you." The guard smiled as he said, "In any case, I wish you the best of luck." "Thank you." Mag nodded in response. Indeed, all of the chefs here appeared to have assistants with them, so he stuck out like a sore thumb as he stood alone at his cooking station. "Kalyalu, you're only making a cucumber salad, and even you have 2 assistant chefs with you, what could this guy be cooking? Maybe he's here to mix some drinks." "Shh, don't badmouth people." The people at the neighboring cooking station were discussing quietly among themselves. Mag turned around, and discovered a rather portly man in a white chef's suit standing beside him. The man had a set of bashful features, and as their eyes met, he gave Mag a polite smile. The man bore a strong resemblance to Bimax, and his appearance made him appear quite amicable. There were 2 little fatzos beside him, both of who appeared to be around 15 to 16 years of age. The 3 of them all bore an uncanny resemblance, and it was quite clear that those 2 were the chef's sons. The chef wore a curious look as he asked, "Hello, my name is Kalyalu. These are my sons, Kakalu and Lukaka. What are you cooking today, brother? Why are you alone?" The 2 little fatzos were also looking at Mag with curious expressions. They were already considered to be rather understaffed compared to the other groups of chefs, and that had struck them with a sense of inferiority. As such, they were feeling a little better after seeing a man who was cooking all by himself. Kalyalu, Kakalu, and Lukaka. Mag felt as if just saying their names was a tongue twister. He smiled as he replied, "I'm Mag. I won't be cooking much today, so I don't need any assistance." According to Josh's requirements, he only had to make enough food for about a 10-person portion. That was a piece of cake for him, so he didn't require any assistance. "I understand." Kalyalu nodded with a knowing expression. Even though it was quite an honor to cook for the king during his birthday banquet, it was quite embarrassing that he had only been tasked with making a salad. As such, he thought that he could empathize with Mag. "It's all right, brother Mag, we may not have enough people as them, and the dishes we make may or may not be presented to His Majesty, but our job is a lot easier than everyone else's. Look at that forest troll with the massive pot above his head. His entire head must be burning right now, Kalyalo consoled with a smile. Indeed. Mag didn't quite understand why he was saying this, but he still nodded in response. It appeared that Kalyalo had misunderstood something, but Mag couldn't be bothered to clear up the potential misunderstanding. As such, he turned to the guard beside him, and instructed, "Please place this over there, give the condiments to me, father, why is he using so much kitchenware when he's cooking one dish like us?" Lakaka asked with a confused look. He must have brought his entire kitchen here. Even though he can only make one dish, he still has to pretend like he was tasked with making many dishes. That's a really good idea, why didn't we think of it? Kakalo mused as he stroked his chin. Kalyalo wore a serious expression as he scolded, "Every chef has his own pride, and I can really understand Brother Mag's feelings here. Back when I came here to cook in the royal kitchen for the first time, I even brought my massive earthenware jar for pickling cucumbers to make myself look more important. Looking at him really reminds me of my younger self. We have to be accepting of him and try to protect him rather than insult him to further wound his ego." "You're right, father." The two brothers nodded in unison. Within the massive kitchen, there were cooking stations of different sizes for different chefs. Chefs who were massive in size and had a large team with them were assigned cooking stations that were several dozens or even over 100 square meters. In contrast, chefs like Mag and Kalyalo who weren't very big and didn't have large teams were only assigned cooking stations that were around 10 square meters. Mag's cooking station was in the very corner of the kitchen, and all of his kitchenware had just been laid out onto the cooking bench by the guard that had accompanied him. Mag glanced down at his watch, only to find that it was still quite early, so he wasn't in a hurry to start cooking. He didn't really care about how big his cooking station was. As long as it was large enough, he was content. Kalyalo and his two sons weren't in a hurry to begin, either. Their cucumbers had already been pickled, and all they had to do was slice and plate them, a process that wouldn't take very long at all. As such, none of them had much to do, so they continued to chat with each other. All of the smallest cooking stations were located in the northwestern corner of the royal kitchen. When the chefs from other parts of the kitchen glanced toward this corner, all of them wore rather disdainful looks. The chefs in this kitchen that had small teams were predominantly looked down on as insignificant chefs who were only there to make up the numbers. Kalyalo was very glad to find a brother who could empathize with his pain, so he was also very happy to speak with Mag. Being spoken to as an equal in the royal kitchen was a very refreshing and comfortable feeling for him. "Brother Mag, have a look at the largest cooking station over there in the north. The chef there is the #1 chef in the entire Roth Empire, Bellman. He's the #1 head chef of the royal palace, and he's responsible for cooking for His Majesty every day. He'll also be cooking 70% of all of the dishes on the birthday banquet today, while the other 30% of dishes will be chosen from the other chefs," Kalyalo said with a hint of envy in his eyes. "Will your pickles be selected? The menu hasn't been decided yet, but having your dish selected is like winning the lottery, we shouldn't pin our hopes on it. There are so many chefs here, and any of them will be able to brag for the rest of their lives if their dishes were to be chosen by His Majesty." Kalyalo shook his head with a forlorn sigh. After a brief pause, Kalyalo looked up at Mag, and consoled, "But don't get frustrated or depressed. You're still young, so the future is yours. Maybe His Majesty will suddenly want to eat a salad during one of his future birthdays and your dish will be chosen. In that case, you'd become the best salad chef on the entire continent. I haven't even learned how to make salad yet." Mag thought to himself rather speechlessly. The world of chefs was also like an empire of sorts, and Bellman was the king of the empire, standing on a pedestal that could not be shaken. In contrast, all of the chefs whose dishes were assured to have a place on the king's table were like the royalty of the empire of chefs. Those who were not yet established stalwarts yet had a good chance of having their dishes chosen by the king were like the promising generals of the empire. Even though there was no royal blood flowing in their veins, they could gain recognition and power for themselves through their splendid skills. As for people like Kalyalu, they were like ordinary footmen. They had a place in the empire of chefs, but it was not a very significant one at all. It didn't really matter to them what the state of the empire was like, and they were only mere bystanders spectating the battle for supremacy in the cooking world. Brother Mag, I really regret not meeting you sooner. If I had met you earlier, I wouldn't have been so bored in the royal kitchen during these past few years. Kalyalu patted Mag's shoulder with an amicable expression. Look like the pickle guy finally graduated from the last cooking bench. Who's that guy that replaced him, though? He appears to be by himself. Could it be that there's an even simpler dish than sliced pickles? Sure there is. You can serve unsliced pickles. Ha ha ha. Mag and Kalyalu were just conversing with each other when a loud burst of derisive laughter erupted from the nearby cooking stations. An enraged look appeared on Kalyalu's face. Those bastards! They're also just salad chefs, yet they think they're better than everyone else. Their salad is nowhere near as delicious as Father's pickles. They only get a slightly larger cooking station because they have a larger team of chefs. Lakaka was also quite angry. All right, let's not stoop to their level. Kalyalu waved a hand before turning to Mag as he said, Don't be sad, Brother Mag. You're still young and full of potential. I'm sure you'll be able to outstrip them soon. Nandal and Vazir are just a pair of old men who don't know how to do anything other than bad-mouthing others. Don't worry, I'm fine. Mag nodded in response. He was quite touched by Kalyalu's thoughtful words, even though they weren't really applicable to him. Nandal and Vazir's jeers had drawn a lot of attention to Mag. Everyone gathered here in the royal kitchen was a renowned chef, and it was the first time they had ever seen someone cook alone during the king's birthday banquet. However, all of them quickly lost interest after realizing that the taunts had been aimed at the chef in the northeastern corner of the kitchen. Even a chef who was serving pickles was positioned ahead of him, so what could he possibly be cooking? He was most likely just trying to show off by bringing along so much kitchenware with him. In the face of the deriding glances being aimed at him, Mag remained completely unfazed. He didn't require the acknowledgement of chefs that were inferior to him, anyway. Kalyalu was greatly relieved to see Mag's tranquil expression. In the past, there had been instances of chefs being crushed by this oppressive pressure, leading them to cooking horrible dishes far below their skill level, thereby ruining their whole careers. He glanced at the time before smiling as he said, All right, Brother Mag, we have to start preparing our pickles now. Make sure to keep an eye on the time so you don't end up missing the deadline. All right, I'm going to begin as well now. Mag nodded with a smile. Uncle Mag, what kind of salad are you serving? Is it going to be a sweet or a sour one? Luluka asked with a curious expression. Mag shook his head with a smile as he replied, I don't make salad. That's enough, you little rascal. Hurry up and start preparing the pickles, we have to make 200 plates. Kalyalu gently swatted Luluka on the head before getting to work. Mag took a curious glance at the dishes they were preparing. He was greeted by the sight of the father and son trio expertly slicing pickles lengthwise, and then positioning them onto plates in a clean and organized manner. A golden sauce was drizzled over the pickles with a pinch of coriander on each of the plates acting as a garnish. The salad looked quite refreshing and appetizing, and it would surely be very delicious when eaten with some porridge. Mag withdrew his gaze before instructing the servant next to him to kill the fire chicken that had been procured in advance. Meanwhile, he picked up one of his knives and began to prepare the secondary ingredients. Braised chicken took quite a long while to cook, so he had to prepare it first. Father, look! Uncle Mag looks like he's going to cook chicken. Lakaka looked on with wonder in his eyes at the sight of the fire chicken being carried over by a pair of servants. The Roth Empire had been in existence for 102 years, and this day was the 45th birthday of the fourth king of the Roth Empire, Andrei Edward. Compared to his three predecessors, Andrei had held the throne for far longer than them. He had ascended to the throne at just 15 years old, and his exceptional political ability allowed the Roth Empire to become more and more powerful, earning it a higher status in the context of the entire Norland continent. Even the powerful and populous Orc race hadn't been able to gain the upper hand in their battles on the border of the empire. On the contrary, they had even lost territory on the border during Andrei's reign thus far. Even though countless warriors of the Roth Empire had given their lives during those battles, the king received widespread support from all of the officials and citizens under his rule. The humans no longer needed to bow their heads in the face of trolls and demons now, and the warriors were more than happy to give their lives to ensure that this remained the case. As such, Andrei was most definitely going to earn himself a place in the history books of the Roth Empire as one of the greatest kings who ever lived. He was only 60 years old, still an infant in the eyes of the other races, whose members enjoyed far longer lifespans than humans. However, his 60th birthday was very much an event that was worthy of celebration in the eyes of the entire empire. There had been rumors that the king's health had been on the wane recently, and he might not be able to make it to his 70th birthday. As such, this birthday banquet had been organized to be an especially grand and prestigious occasion. The palace was spotlessly clean and glimmering under the sunlight. Guests from all races were present, each sitting alone with a small table placed in front of them. The king sat on his throne with his head of grey hair draped over his shoulders. The countless wrinkles all over his face made him appear older than his actual age, but his brown eyes were still bright and piercing. He was like a keen-eyed hunter appraising his prey, giving off a sense of majesty and prestige that set him apart from the average old man. Sitting on either side of him were Josh and Sean, who were wearing blue and golden robes, respectively. Beside them were Irina and Richard. Richard's expression was quite strained as he appraised Irina, who was sitting across him. Irina's assault on Brent had spread panic and horror throughout the entire Magus Tower, yet they had no choice but to pretend as if they were oblivious to the identity of the culprit. Josh was also most definitely aware of what Irina had done. The incident from 3 years ago had taken place as the child she had birthed with Alex had completely pushed Josh over the edge, thereby leading him to do something so deranged and drastic. Irina was eating sunflower seeds with a calm expression, and she didn't even take as much as a single glance at Richard. Instead, she was peeking at Amy out of the corner of her eye. Amy was joyfully munching on some small pastries, eating like an adorable little squirrel. Irina felt as if her heart were about to melt at the sight of her adorable display. Is he really cooking for the king today? He's not going to have his cover blown, is he? A hint of concern appeared in Irina's eyes. Josh was also sitting beside Richard diagonally across from Irina, and he also wore a rather complex expression. He was the first one to have been made aware of the fact that Irina had arrived in Rodu. However, she deliberately skirted around him to travel to the Magus Tower and interrogate Brent instead of asking him about what had happened 3 years ago. Her actions suggested that she no longer trusted Josh, and that she had been alerted to certain details regarding the incident that had taken place 3 years ago. Josh set aside his complex emotions as he withdrew his gaze from Irina and turned toward Sean. Sean just so happened to be turning his gaze toward him as well, and their eyes met. Both of them smiled and nodded at each other before looking away again. It's about time Father chose a final heir after this birthday banquet. Sean, it's time for us to settle this once and for all. Josh clenched his fists before relaxing them again, maintaining a carefree smile the entire time. The rest of the guests present were all representative ambassadors from different races. During the king's past birthdays, only the ambassadors that were stationed at the Roth Empire attended his birthday banquet. However, on this occasion, all of the races seemed to have sensed that this birthday was more meaningful than others, and they had all sent extremely important figures to attend the banquet. The Elven race had sent their only princess, the Orc race had sent the second elder of their tribal alliance. All of these guests were extremely renowned throughout the entire continent, and it was a great gesture of respect toward the king of the Roth Empire that they had been deployed to attend his birthday banquet. Krasu and Novan sat behind the representatives of all of the races. Principal Novan was the representative of Chaos City, and he was also a powerful 10th tier great magic caster, so he was naturally held in high regard. As for Krasu, even Richard could sit across from Irina, so there was certainly no one who was going to begrudge his seat in the royal palace. In fact, the king had even invited him to sit beside Richard as equals, but Krasu had turned down the offer. As such, it could be seen that Krasu's position in the king's heart was not inferior to Richard's. Further behind Krasu and Novan were the dukes and officials of the Roth Empire. Many of them had brought their family members along with them, so the entire cavernous palace had been filled with tables and chairs, creating an extremely lively and bustling scene. The king raised his hand, and all of the chatter within the palace quickly died down. He looked around at all of the guests with an almost stern expression as he said, "I'm very glad that everyone was able to come here and attend my birthday banquet today. During the past century, our Roth Empire has coexisted in harmony with all races." Everyone listened in silence to the address delivered by the most powerful king on the Norland continent. The power of the humans had propelled them to the very pinnacle of the Norland continent, and their massive population coupled with their unmatched intelligence gave them limitless potential. All of the other races had to admit that the human race was no longer the feeble force it had been many years ago. Among their ranks, there was an insanely powerful human magic caster who was capable of bludgeoning a giant dragon to death with a single swing of his staff. At the very least, no one present in the royal palace dared to claim that they could defeat him in a one-on-one battle. As for Amy, she was happily enjoying the little pastries on the table in front of her, and she was surreptitiously making faces at Irina from time to time. "Hey! Teacher Luna is also here. This is really bad. Who is father going to choose now?" Amy suddenly caught sight of Luna sitting nearby, and her little hand froze just as she was about to place a bean paste cake into her mouth. Luna was also looking at her with an amused smile on her face. Amy really was a little foodie, she was always eating wherever she went. Thinking back to 2 years ago, when Luna had first met Amy, she had been wearing old and ragged clothes, and could barely even walk properly. Now, she was wearing a gorgeous little purple dress with her hair tied up into a pair of pretty little braids, sitting in the royal palace of the Roth Empire. Her transformation had been quite a staggering one. Just what had happened to Mag during these past few months? Even she was stunned by the transformation that he and Amy had undergone during this time. Luna's smile widened even further as she thought to herself, "Mr. Mag is a really fantastic person, and Amy is also a good little girl. They deserve all the happiness in the world. Teacher Luna looks so beautiful when she smiles, and she's so good to me, but big sister Irina is also really good. I don't know which one to choose anymore." Amy took a bite of the cake in her hand before stuffing the rest into Ugly Duckling's mouth with a conflicted expression on her face. "Luna, you told me that Mr. Mag will also be attending His Majesty's birthday banquet today. Where is he right now?" the elderly man sitting beside Luna asked with a smile. "He should be in the palace already, but we might not be able to see him today." Luna shook her head with a smile as she said, "He's a chef today, not a mathematician." Lakaka had truly been stunned by the sight of the fire chicken, even to the extent that he forgot to keep his voice down, and received many displeased glances as a result. Everyone turned their attention to Mag's cooking station, just in time to see a servant handing the drumstick of a freshly slain fire chicken to him. Mag's long and thin blade sliced through the skin on the drumstick in an expert manner before the meat was sliced into cubes of identical size. The large chicken drumstick was reduced to a pile of cubes and a spotlessly clean bone in what seemed like the blink of an eye. Exceptional knife skills were a mandatory foundation for all chefs, and there were many chefs present who could slice food into strands as thin as hair, so they weren't overly surprised by his superb knife skills. Instead, they were stunned by the fact that Mag was using a fire chicken drumstick. He didn't even have a single assistant chef with him, so how could he have the right to cook a meat dish? Nandal was in the process of barking instructions at his student chefs when he turned to Mag with furrowed brows, and murmured to himself, "Did this guy get his ingredients mixed up? Why is he requesting a fire chicken drumstick? Isn't he making a salad?" A disdainful sneer appeared on Vazir's face as he scoffed, making the incorrect dish will get him kicked out of the palace. I reckon he's been completely overwhelmed by the occasion and forgotten what he's supposed to cook. Isn't he afraid that he'll get his head chopped off for making such a grave error? Many of the other chefs also chimed in with insults of their own. All of them were of the opinion that Mag had either gone insane or was trying to show off to everyone by cooking a dish that hadn't been designated to him. None of the top chefs present said anything in response to what Mag was doing, but all of the chefs lower down the hierarchy were quite eager to insult Mag in order to make themselves more important and mask their own insecurities. Mag was a man who had been insulted countless times and dished out just as many insults in his past life, so this level of abuse was completely trivial to him. Kalyalo was also looking at Mag with a concerned expression as he asked, "What are you doing, brother Mag? Are you trying to make chicken into salad?" "Chicken salad is indeed quite tasty, but I'm making braised chicken today." Mag shook his head with a smile as he placed the cubes of chicken into his pot, then turned to the servant beside him, and instructed, "Please get me 10 freshly killed Kirin carps and the beef tenderloin I requested." "Yes." The servant hurriedly departed to do Mag's bidding. Even though the latter was only one person, he had been invited to Rhoda by none other than the second prince himself, so the servant naturally didn't dare to express disdain for him as the other chefs did. Uncle Mag's cooking fish and beef as well. The surprise on Luluka's face became even more pronounced. Their restaurant was renowned for its pickles, but that wasn't the only dish they served. However, they were only permitted to make their signature pickle dish every year when they were invited to the king's birthday banquets. "That's impossible." Nandal stared at Mag with incredulity etched on his face. He had been cooking during the king's birthday banquets for over 20 years, and it had taken an entire decade to progress from being able to make one salad to being permitted to make 2 salads. As for making a third dish, he had already pinned those hopes on his son and given up on himself. However, Mag was only one person, and it was his first time here, yet he was making 3 dishes, all of which were meat dishes. Nandal felt as if he had been given a head start of over 20 years in a race, only for Mag to speed past him in the blink of an eye and attain an unassailable lead in the process. A thought suddenly occurred to Nandal, and he chuckled coldly. "Humph! You're planning to make 3 dishes on your own? You'll have to make at least 30 portions in that case. It's impossible for anyone to make so many portions alone. You're just biting off more than you can chew." Kalyalo turned to Mag with a concerned look, and said, "Brother Mag, will you be able to make 3 dishes on your own? This is His Majesty's birthday banquet, so we have to ensure that we offer the best dishes we're capable of cooking. If you screw this up, you could die." "It's all right, I've always cooked by myself in my restaurant as well," Mag replied with a smile. 30 portions was a piece of cake for him. Kalyalo was slightly relieved by Mag's calm display, but he still said, "All right, but you have to make haste. If you need some help, I can get my 2 sons to give you a hand." "Sure." Mag nodded in response. 10 Kirin carps with their scales and internal organs removed were soon handed over to Mag. He insisted on removing the small bones in person, and refused to let anyone else undertake that duty in his stead. All of the guests gathered at the palace today were very important figures on the continent. If they were to choke on a small fish bone due to an oversight on his part, he would most certainly be held accountable. Mag quickly extracted a series of small fish bones from all 10 Kirin carps in an extremely rehearsed and expertly manner before setting them aside to marinate. The fresh beef tenderloin had also been sliced into steaks of even thickness before being tenderized with a small wooden mallet. "I really don't want to waste such premium ingredients on those bastards." Mag pulled out a bottle of wine from a crate as he shook his head in a forlorn manner. However, he then realized that Irina and Amy were also going to be tasting his dishes during the banquet, and his mood was lifted significantly. Pop! The cork on the bottle of wine was pulled out amid an audible pop. The wine within the bottle was poured into a container that was filled with steaks, and the rich aroma of the wine instantly overwhelmed all of the other aromas wafting throughout the kitchen, forcing its way up everyone's nostrils. That wine smells amazing. Is someone using premium wine from the Buffett winery to cook their dish? No, this wine smells even more aromatic than the premium wine from the Buffett winery. Could it be that someone got their hands on the Buffet winery's V-grade wine? That's cheating. All of the nearby chefs glanced around with bewildered expressions, trying to locate the wine that was giving off this delectable aroma. Their eyes then focused on Mag in unison, upon which their expressions immediately stiffened. The northwestern corner was essentially the salad corner. Could it be that he was using wine to make salad? Who is he and what is he cooking? The same question appeared in everyone's mind. If it weren't for the fact that they were busy preparing their own dishes, they would be approaching Mag and asking him in person. Of course, most of the chefs simply regarded Mag as a court jester. It was an extremely rare opportunity to be selected to cook during the king's birthday banquet, and it was a tragedy that he was squandering such a valuable opportunity. Kalyulu's concern only deepened as he glanced at Mag. He's using wine to cook his dishes? Will His Majesty and all the guests really appreciate that? I hope Brother Mag isn't being serious, he's playing with fire here. At this moment, Maghead was already in his own bubble of intense focus, basking in the world of cooking. His expression was completely serious, and his movements were fast yet unhurried. Watching him cook was like watching a graceful artist at work as he juggled all three dishes in an expert manner. Some of the chefs had already finished preparing their dishes at this point. In particular, most of the salads were ready for presentation. Nandal, Vazir, and their student chefs had nothing left to do, and all of them were appraising Mag with undisguised disdain, even to the extent that they were making bets whether Mag was actually cooking for the palace's servants rather than the king. Kalyulu and his sons had also finished their dishes, and all three of them were looking at Mag with concerned expressions. Right at this moment, 10 extremely beautiful female servants were led by an attendant over to Mag, and the attendant gave him a respectful smile as he said, "Mr. Mag, please present the first dish to His Majesty." The entire kitchen suddenly fell silent. All of the chefs had put down their kitchenware and were staring at Mag in unison, wondering if they had misheard what the attendant had said. Nandal and Vazir's smiles had completely stiffened on their faces. They stared at the female servants standing at Mag's cooking station, and their mouths were wide agape as if they had just been slapped in the face. He was only one chef, and it was his first time cooking during the king's banquet, yet his dish had been selected to be the first one to be offered to the king? How was this possible? The same thought appeared in everyone's mind. They were even suspecting whether the attendant had accidentally approached the wrong chef. "Father, I think I just misheard what was being said." "I think I also misheard." Kalyulu and his sons were just stunned as everyone else. In reality, even the attendant was feeling rather uneasy. He had been working at the royal kitchen for over a decade, and this was the first time something like this had ever happened. He had previously confirmed over and over again that this was indeed the chef that had been recommended by the second prince, and only then did he dare to approach Mag. The fact that he had been recommended by the second prince to cook for the king clearly indicated that he had to be an exceptional chef, but the attendant was very perplexed by the strange kitchenware strewn all over Mag's cooking bench. He didn't even know whether Mag had finished preparing the dishes that were to be presented to the king. If Mag wasn't prepared in time, even the attendant would be held partially accountable, so he was feeling very nervous. "The first dish is ready, please wait for a moment." Mag nodded calmly as he turned off the magic stove that the braised chicken was sitting on, and then removed the lid of the pot. A plume of white steam rose up into the air as the delectable aromas of shiitake mushrooms and chicken wafted throughout the entire kitchen. The countless aromas in the kitchen had formed a vortex that was quite convoluted and overwhelming, yet the aroma from Mag's dish was like a sharp blade that pierced directly through this vortex, standing out among the countless aromas as one that was completely unique and refreshing. What a unique aroma! My mouth is watering just from smelling it. The attendant's eyes immediately lit up. During his dozen or so years at the royal kitchen, there were very few dishes that had been able to appeal to him so strongly just through their aromas alone. Furthermore, all of those dishes had received glowing praise from the king. As expected of the chef that was recommended by the second prince. The attendant was feeling a lot more relieved now. Having already prepared such an exceptional dish, it wouldn't matter all that much even if Mag's other 2 dishes were a bit more mediocre. That smells so good. I really want to drink chicken soup now. Luluka closed his eyes as he inhaled deeply. Kalyaloa looked at Mag with an admiring expression, and praised, "You really are an extraordinary chef, Brother Mag. The aroma of your dish is already comparable to Bellman's dishes." How could this be? He's only one person, how could he cook such a delicious dish? Nandal stared at Mag in disbelief, and his face stung with embarrassment as if he had just been slapped. Vazir wore a bitter expression as he scoffed, "It may smell good, but the flavor is what's important. A delicious dish requires input from many chefs. Look at Bellman, he's got so many assistant chefs responsible for every single aspect of his dishes, yet this guy's doing everything by himself. There's no way that he can cook a delicious dish like that." Vazir's student chefs all began to suck up to him upon hearing his analysis. This was a dish that was going to be presented to the king, and he was going to receive a severe punishment if it wasn't to the king's liking. All of the other chefs were looking at Mag with complex expressions on their faces. They felt as if this rookie had suddenly overtaken all of the veteran chefs and scaled to the top of the royal kitchen hierarchy. This was an extremely bad feeling, just as if someone had suddenly torn up the rulebook and pulled the rug out from under their feet, leaving them completely stunned and reeling. Mag calmly filled 10 intricately crafted bowls with braised chicken and rice, and then placed a bowl onto each of the platters that the 10 female servants were holding. He then smiled, and said, "This is braised chicken and rice, the best way to consume it would be to pour the broth over the rice." "All right, I'll be sure to pass on the message." The attendant nodded before departing with the female servants. Within the grand palace, all types of wines and dishes had already been placed onto the tables of the guests present. The orc representative was munching on a massive bone, the forest troll representative was drinking a large barrel of fruit wine using a long straw, and the goblin representative had already downed 10 cups of wine, but was hiding 2 more cups up his sleeve with a sly look on his face. Amy was holding a chicken drumstick in one hand and a fish cake in the other. Her cheeks were bulging with food as she slurred, "Even though the food here isn't as good as father's, I still had a lot of delicious food today." Meanwhile, Krasu's chopsticks remained untouched as he shook his head in reply. "The food here isn't just not as good as Mag's, the difference is night and day. After eating Boss Mag's cooking, I can't bear to stomach this food anymore. I should save my appetite for Boss Mag's dishes later." Boss Mag is indeed a genius. Novan nodded as he took a sip of tea. He hadn't eaten anything, either. In contrast, Irina had taken a small bite out of every dish on the table before her. At this moment, she wore a troubled expression on her face as she thought to herself, which dish was made by him? The dishes aren't presented with the chef's names on them, so how am I supposed to know who cooked them? I've tasted every dish, and they're all pretty ordinary. But then again, Alex's cooking surely isn't anything out of the ordinary. Could it be that he's planning to cook roast beef again? I feel like his roast beef is better than all of these dishes, but it doesn't really fit the occasion. Irina shook her head. She didn't know whether she had already tasted Alex's cooking or if his dishes had yet to come. As one of 10 dukes of the Roth Empire, Duke Abraham's seat was quite close to the king's. However, he hadn't eaten much, either. He put down his chopsticks before shaking his head with a slightly disappointed expression. Bellman's dishes are just as delicious as ever, but they're exactly the same as they were last year, there's no element of freshness or surprise. In comparison, those cubes of beef that I had for lunch yesterday gave me a very pleasant surprise. I have to take more people with me tomorrow so I can buy more cubes of beef. 3 was nowhere near enough. The king hadn't eaten much, either, and the borderline stern expression on his face struck everyone with a sense of awe and veneration. Right at this moment, Sean turned to Josh with a smile, and said, I heard that you invited a chef to cook for father's birthday today. Is his dish among these ones? Right at this moment, the attendant led the 10 female servants into the palace. The chef invited by the second prince will now be offering his dish to his majesty. It's his dish. Irina's eyes immediately lit up at the sight of the female servants making their way gracefully into the palace, wondering what kind of dish Mag was going to serve to everyone. If Mag only knew how to make roast beef, then he wasn't a good chef in her eyes. She didn't want to eat roast beef every day for the rest of her life. Josh smiled as he said, "Looks like you asked just in time, brother. I invited this chef from Chaos City specifically for this occasion, and his cooking skills are the best I've ever seen. I hope father will also be pleased with his cooking." Josh's words sent a slight stir running through the palace. They didn't think that the second prince would extend such glowing praise toward a chef. The best chef he's ever seen? Has Josh really found a good chef? Moreover, he found him in Chaos City? Abraham was rather perplexed. He counted the number of female servants, only to find that he was sitting too far back to be able to taste the dish, an observation that was very disheartening to him. During normal palace banquets, he naturally sat right up near the very front. However, all of the representatives of the different races were more esteemed than him on this occasion, so he could only sit behind Krasu. "I appreciate the thought, Josh." The king nodded in acknowledgement, but his steely expression remained unchanged. Sean's pupils contracted minutely, but he still maintained his smile as he said, "So you're saying that chef has better cooking skills than even Bellman? I really am looking forward to seeing what dish he's prepared now." Even though Sean appeared to be praising Josh, this was actually a masked threat. By placing Mag on a pedestal above Bellman, both he and Josh would be held accountable if his cooking wasn't to the king's taste. In the face of Sean's barbed compliment, Josh also smiled as he replied, "I can't comment on whether his cooking skills are superior to Bellman's. I'll let father be the judge. Father's cooking skills are the best in the world." Amy nibbled on a chicken wing as she nodded confidently to herself. Sean nodded as he aimed a meaningful glance at Josh. "I'll know whether that man is Alex or not after tasting his cooking. However, if he really is Alex, then what's Josh doing bringing him into the palace? What is he trying to do?" The conflict between the first and second prince was no secret to the officials of the Roth Empire. All of the representatives of the different races were also aware of their strained relationship, but none of them said anything as they turned their eyes toward the platters being carried by the female servants. There were already rumors spreading, stating that King Andrei was most likely going to choose an heir following the conclusion of his birthday banquet. No one knew who he was going to choose between the first prince, who ruled over the empire's military forces and was hailed as a hero by the general public, or the second prince, who had the Magus Tower as a powerful backer of his. As such, the presents offered to the king by the two princes could perhaps sway Andrei's final decision. If the chef invited by Josh really could offer a dish that could please the king, then perhaps he would be a tiny step closer to the throne. However, this was obviously a double-edged sword. If the chef's dish wasn't to the king's liking, then he would be shooting his own foot, and tilting the scale in Sean's favor. The entire palace gradually fell silent as everyone stared intently at the platters in the female servants' hands, wondering what kind of dish could earn such a glowing praise from the second prince. The attendant took a platter from one of the female servants and carried it to the king's table before removing the lid. He then extended a respectful bow, and informed, "Your Majesty, this dish is known as braised chicken and rice." The remaining 9 female servants also removed the lids from their platters at the same time, and placed the portions of braised chicken and rice onto the tables of the princes and the esteemed guests. The rich aromas of chicken and shiitake mushroom slowly wafted through the air, instantly overwhelming the aromas of all of the other dishes in the palace. The king's steely facade finally cracked as he looked down at the braised chicken and rice dish before him with a hint of surprise on his face. Irina took a whiff of her own portion, and her eyes immediately lit up. "It smells so good. I can smell chicken and shiitake mushroom, but why is it so alluring?" It's completely different from the chicken and shiitake mushroom I've had in the past. This rice is also so beautiful, it looks like there are miniature little moons inside. Could it be that he really did transform into a chef during these past 3 years? I can't believe he can make such an alluring dish. Even the best chefs of the elven race can't make chicken and shiitake mushroom appear so appealing. No. It looks like he's been plotting to take over from me as the family chef for a long time. How dares he try it replace me? I won't allow that to happen. Amy must have my cooking in the future. I can't let my prodigious cooking aptitude go to waste. All of the representatives of the other races were already completely entranced by the aroma of the braised chicken and rice dish. The dishes they had tasted had already opened their eyes to the brilliance of human cooking, yet this dish made everything else pale in comparison. The delectable aroma coursed through the palace rapidly, and all of the guests and officials who wouldn't get a chance to taste the dish were gulping involuntarily with envious looks on their faces. This aroma is incredible. Shiitake mushroom is quite a rarely used ingredient, but I didn't think it could combine with chicken to create such an alluring aroma. This is a stroke of genius. Abraham wore a stunned expression as he craned his neck to stare at the braised chicken and rice dish on Krasu's table. I can't believe I won't get to taste something so delicious. This is an outrage. Meanwhile, Sean had already slowly clenched his fists beneath his table. He had seen the chef that Josh had invited the day before, and it appeared that his cooking skills really were quite exceptional. If Josh was able to appease Andre through this birthday present, that would be very bad news to him. Josh took a glance at Sean, and the smile on his face became even more pronounced. The chef said that this dish is best eaten by pouring the chicken broth over the rice, the attendant said in a respectful manner before departing from the palace with the female servants. The king picked up his chopsticks and looked down at the dish before him. The cubes of chicken in the dish were all completely flawless and of identical size. The potatoes were soft yet still maintained their structural integrity, while the green asparagus and bell peppers of different colors embellished the dish to great effect. Meanwhile, the golden chicken broth was faintly glistening, but didn't appear to be greasy in the slightest. The rich aromas of chicken and shiitake mushroom wafted toward him, completely captivating his appetite, even though he had thought that he wasn't hungry just a moment ago. He picked up a piece of chicken with his chopsticks before placing it into his mouth, upon which his wrinkled face immediately lit up. The delectable broth encapsulating the chicken released an incredible flavor, making Andre feel as if his taste buds had been completely awakened. Imagery of gentle spring rain falling on a set of lush plains was evoked within his mind, and his entire body was suddenly filled with a burst of youthful energy. The chicken was tender yet not mushy, and the flavor of the condiments and shiitake mushroom had completely seeped into the meat, making it incredibly delicious. Even after swallowing the mouthful of chicken, its residual aftertaste continued to linger in his mouth, making him close his eyes involuntarily. He couldn't pinpoint the exact moment in his life when eating ceased to be an enjoyable activity for him. Before he knew it, he was eating every day solely for sustenance, and all of his nutrient and energy intake was being dictated solely by his chefs. Even Bellman's dishes no longer sparked a sense of joy and wonder in him as they once had. However, this braised chicken struck him with a sense of bliss and elation that he hadn't experienced from any dish for a very long time. After swallowing the piece of chicken, he immediately placed a piece of shiitake mushroom into his mouth. The unrivaled flavor had completely enchanted him, and his blissful silence was a better indication of how much he was enjoying the dish than any verbal praise he could extend. The king had barely eaten anything thus far, but he was quickly working his way through the braised chicken and rice, and this observation had created a slight stir among the guests present. "Let me see what this tastes like." Irina also picked up a piece of chicken with her chopsticks. Amy looked at Irina, and murmured to herself, after eating that piece of chicken, "Big sister Irina is probably going to fall in love with father. This flavor is completely indescribable." Irina lacked the vocabulary to describe what she was currently feeling. Never had she ever tasted something this delicious. The combination of the dish's delectable flavor and exquisite texture struck her with a sense of unrivaled bliss. In particular, the flavor of that shiitake mushroom was extremely unique and delicious. Mushrooms could be occasionally collected in the wind forest as well, but none of them could hold a candle to the shiitake mushroom in this dish. Swallowing her first mouthful of chicken, Irina then used her spoon to drizzle some chicken broth onto her rice. The faint golden broth was absorbed by the moonlight rice, turning the rice into an alluring golden color. After absorbing the rich chicken broth, the rice had become extremely delicious, and the more she chewed, the more delicious it became. What has he been doing for the past 3 years? He couldn't even bake sweet potatoes without cooking them into charcoal. How could he possibly make such delicious food? This is... Irina stared at her braised chicken and rice with incredulity etched on her face. All of a sudden, a dangerous look flashed through her eyes. Could it be that he worked so hard to learn cooking because he doesn't like my cooking? Is he doing this so he could take over from me as the family chef? No. I can't squander my God-given talent like this. Irina shook her head with a determined expression, but it was quickly replaced by a blissful smile as she tasted a piece of shiitake mushroom. Well, I guess I can allow him to cook 1 meal a day. I'll be responsible for cooking the other 2 meals, though. Irina nodded to herself after making up her mind. She then noticed the pretty little braids in Amy's hair, and her heart was filled with curiosity as she thought to herself, even though we've only been apart for 3 years, I feel like I have to get to know him all over again. Cooking, braiding hair, what else has he learned? The massive forest troll representative had received a portion of the same size as everyone else, and ate an entire bowl of braised chicken and rice in one mouthful. It then smacked its lips as it praised, "This chicken is simply far too delicious." As expected of the chef recommended by the second prince. It's just that the portions seem to be a little small. Meanwhile, the goblin representative ate a small bite of chicken before shooting a disdainful glance at the forest troll. Only a Neanderthal would eat an entire dish in one bite. Such a delicious dish is wasted on the likes of you. Even women don't eat such pathetic little mouthfuls as you do. Can you even taste anything? The forest troll immediately returned the favor. The goblins and the forest trolls had been at war for a long time, and the battle raging on their borders was just as fierce as the one between the humans and the orcs. However, they were now in the royal palace of the Roth Empire, celebrating the king's birthday, so they limited their altercation to a verbal one rather than engaging in a physical confrontation. All of the representatives of each race were clearly very pleased with the braised chicken and rice, and a chorus of praise rang out within the palace. Meanwhile, all of the officials were left stranded as they greedily inhaled the delectable aroma wafting through the air. If this were just a normal dish, it wouldn't earn such glowing praise from so many prominent figures no matter how delicious it was. However, the chef who had cooked this dish had been invited to Rodu, so the praise they were delivering toward the dish was an indirect compliment paid to Josh himself. Is it really that delicious? I can only smell it and see it, but I can't taste it. This is torture. Duke Abraham felt as if there was a river of drool building up in his mouth. He was racking his brains to try and think of a way to taste this dish, but on such an important occasion, even he didn't dare to do anything out of line. Is it really that good? Sean looked around at all of the delighted guests, and hesitated momentarily before also tasting his first piece of chicken. A complex look immediately appeared on his face, but he simply couldn't bring himself to stop chewing. This dish wasn't just good, it was delicious to the extreme. The tender and delicious chicken had absorbed the fragrance of the shiitake mushrooms. He almost bit his tongue, such was his eagerness to sink his teeth into the piece of chicken. In contrast, Bellman's food really did seem rather bland and ordinary. Looks like he definitely isn't Alex. Alex is a complete noob when it comes to cooking, and there's no way that he would become a chef, let alone one that's this good. Sean put down his chopsticks before taking a glance at Josh. He knew how much Josh wanted Alex dead, so if that man really was Alex, then there was no way that Josh would have let him live for so long. He wasn't Alex, but was that little girl Alex's daughter? She was a half-elf of the right age, and she possessed extraordinary magical aptitude as well as silver hair and blue eyes that were identical to Irina's. Wasn't that too much of a coincidence? Alex had been completely disabled during the assassination attempt 3 years ago, so it made sense that he would entrust his child to someone else. In his disabled condition, he wouldn't even be able to look after himself, let alone a small child as well. If she really is Alex's daughter, then perhaps I can interrogate that chef to find out information about Alex. Sean withdrew his gaze as a contemplative look appeared on his face. If he could find Alex, he would be able to deal Josh a lethal blow. No one would want to support a prince who had orchestrated Alex's assassination. Alex was a hero of the Roth Empire, and the legacy that he had left behind was very much a lasting one. Even though the king had already swept this matter under the rug, Sean was not willing to pass up such an opportunity. He would only get one chance to ascend to the throne, and he had to win this battle for the throne regardless of what cost he had to pay. He had to find Alex before Josh, and then force him to reveal Josh as the mastermind behind the assassination 3 years ago to the entire world. Of course, if Josh hadn't been completely driven mad by his jealousy, he wouldn't have been so stupid as to leave Mag alive. As expected, falling in love with a woman was a dangerous trap. No matter how cunning a man was, their IQ would drop to 0 should they be struck with love. After surveying the situation from the shadows for a while, the attendant finally departed with a content smile on his face. It appeared that the king and all of the guests were very pleased with Mag's first dish, and he was very glad to see this. The royal kitchen was still an extremely bustling and lively place as all of the chefs continued to prepare dishes. Different dishes had to be prepared and presented at different points during the banquet, so they had to be constantly working. No guest was going to eat only one dish throughout the course of the entire banquet. The royal palace had to showcase the diversity of the human cuisine to all of its esteemed guests. However, many of the chefs were stealing glances at the secluded corner of the kitchen, where the chef from Chaos City was working by himself. The fact that his dish had been selected to be presented to the king had come as a massive shock to everyone. Chaos City had only been in existence for just over a century, and the city had no renowned chefs. It was most often the case that chefs were unable to make a living in the competitive gastronomic industry of Rodu, thereby forcing them to move to Chaos City. For example, the head chef of Dukas restaurant, Beat, was only as a student of one of Bellman's student chefs. With his cooking skills, he most likely wouldn't even have been chosen to cook for the king during his birthday banquet. As such, there had always been a hint of bias and discrimination against chefs who hailed from Chaos City. Now that an unknown chef from Chaos City had been invited by the second prince to cook for the king, all of the other chefs were naturally feeling quite displeased. His Highness is most likely going to get screwed over by that guy from Chaos City. There's no way that he can cook anything even halfway decent, a chef scoffed, and his words immediately met with approval from many of the other chefs. All of them were speculating whether Mag was going to be detained and executed soon. Right at this moment, the attendant from earlier strode into the kitchen with the 10 female servants again, and he looked at Mag with an excited expression as he said, "Congratulations, Master Mag, His Majesty and all of the esteemed guests were very pleased with your dish. Looks like you'll be in the running for the best dish of the day." The entire royal kitchen abruptly fell silent as all of the chefs looked on in astonishment. Arg! A chef accidentally burned his hand on his stovetop in his stunned stupor, and he immediately thrust his hand into the barrel of water nearby. The best dish of the day? That was an honor that was reserved only for the best chef in the royal kitchen. It wouldn't be much of an exaggeration to say that the one who received this accolade would be hailed as the #1 chef on the entire Norland continent. In the past 9 years, Master Bellman had dominated that position. On the few occasions where he had been beaten, it was always an extremely renowned and widely respected chef who had taken his place. Even though just one dish wasn't a three-dimensional representation of a chef's cooking ability, it could certainly make a chef stand out in the culinary world. A chef who could earn the approval of the king would undoubtedly have an immeasurable future ahead of them. As such, the best dish accolade was one that was sought after by all of the chefs present, yet the attendant was proclaiming that Mag had a good chance of securing it. If he wasn't exaggerating, then Mag was surely the biggest black horse in this entire kitchen. How is that possible? Nandal's and Vazir's expression changed drastically upon hearing this. They had thought that Mag was only a third-rate chef, yet he had received praise from the king himself, and was in the running for best dish of the day. Thinking back to the insults they had aimed at Mag, both of them were so embarrassed that they wanted nothing better than to be swallowed up by the ground beneath their feet. Furthermore, what was even more terrifying to them was that if Mag took Bellman's place as the premier chef of the royal kitchen, he would have the power to kick both of them out of the royal kitchen. The fact that they were regularly invited to cook during royal banquets had earned them a lot of renown and income during the past few years. They were hoping to have their student chefs inherit this privilege and make it a lasting legacy, but it appeared that they offended someone that they couldn't afford to mess with, and those dreams were about to be dashed. "You're so awesome, Uncle Mag." Luluka and Kalyaloa looked up at Mag with admiration shimmering in their eyes. Kalyaloa was still in disbelief. What is happening to this world? Am I still dreaming? Thank you for your kind words. Please wait a moment, the second dish will be ready soon. Mag nodded with a calm and collected expression. He didn't think that he would be able to secure victory with just a single dish. After all of the most outstanding chefs of the Norland continent were gathered in the kitchen, so he would need to serve more than one exceptional dish to completely crush all of his competitors. As such, he had to put everything into the next two dishes as well. After all, he had only traveled to Rodu in order to complete the system's mission. If he were to fail, the consequences would be catastrophic, and he would have taken a massive risk for nothing. Furthermore, he was also quite curious about the deluxe reward that the system had promised him if he were to complete the mission. All right. The attendant nodded before stepping away to afford Mag some personal space, not daring to hurry Mag in his cooking. The exemplary skills that Mag had displayed had completely won him over, and barring any accidents, he was undoubtedly going to become a prominent rising star in the royal kitchen. In the northern section of the kitchen, a middle-aged chef turned his gaze toward Mag with a displeased look on his face. He then turned to Bellman, who was wearing a black and white chef's suit with his grey hair tucked in an impeccable manner under his tall chef's hat, and he grumbled, "Master, that chef from Chaos City focus on what you're doing, there's no point in looking at what everyone else is doing." Bellman continued his cooking in a calm and collected manner as he cut off the middle-aged man mid-sentence. However, the chef was still quite disgruntled. "He's just a chef from Chaos City, even Beat is rated as a top-grade chef in that god-forsaken city. How could he possibly have the skills to contend with you for the best dish of the day? I refuse to believe this." "Exactly. Master's been cooking for longer than he's been alive, how could he possibly compare to Master? I reckon that attendant's just spouting nonsense. His Majesty clearly loves Master's dishes the most." All of the other student chefs also chimed in with displeased expressions. In their eyes, Mag wasn't even worthy of a second glance from Bellman, so how could he possibly compete with their master for the most prized accolade in the cooking world? If he can really cook something that can satisfy His Majesty, then that would be worthy of celebration, not condemnation. Bellman put down the ladle in his hand before turning to his student chefs with a serious expression as he said, "I've told all of you on more than one occasion that there's always room for improvement in the art of cooking. In order to become true chefs, you must be willing to constantly learn and innovate. I certainly wouldn't dare to say I'm a perfect chef, and I would love to see all of you use me as a stepping stone to reach higher levels in your own cooking. Only then will this art continue to advance, and I'm much more interested in seeing that than in clinging onto my title of the so-called #1 chef of the royal kitchen." All of the student chefs fell silent upon hearing this. Even though they were still feeling rather disgruntled, Bellman's words had taught them a valuable lesson. The pleasant sound of steak sizzling on a hot metal slab soon rang out from Mag's cooking station. The mesmerizing aromas of beef, wine, and black pepper wafted throughout the entire kitchen as 10 steaks were plated. Broccoli and bell peppers of different colors acted as embellishments for the dish before the black pepper sauce was poured over the steaks. Soon, 10 portions of steak had been carried out of the kitchen by the 10 female servants. Nandal and Vazir had already learned to keep their mouths firmly shut. If it weren't for the fact that they had already offended Mag to an irreversible degree, they would have been clambering to suck up to Mag right now. After steaks were prepared, Mag was able to take a small break, and during that time, Kalyalu made his way over to him with an admiring smile on his face. "Brother Mag, I didn't think that you would be such an exceptional chef. My apologies for making those assumptions earlier. If one of your dishes is rated as the best dish of the day, you'll be forging a resounding reputation for yourself." "You're far too kind, Brother Kalyalu. My dishes are nowhere near the best this kitchen has to offer." Even though Mag was feeling quite confident, he still shook his head with a modest smile. Within the palace, the king put down his spoon, having completely finished the portion of braised chicken and rice on the table in front of him. Not even a single grain of rice remained in his bowl, and the abundant nutrition in the dish coupled with its delectable flavor had brought a healthy flush to his cheeks. His only complaint was that a single portion simply wasn't enough, and he was left wanting more. All of the representatives of the other races also felt the same way. If it weren't for the fact that it would be inappropriate to do so, they'd most definitely be requesting seconds. Right at this moment, the attendant led the 10 female servants into the palace. "The chef invited by the second prince will now be offering his second dish to His Majesty." The braised chicken and rice had given everyone a massively pleasant surprise, but it had also significantly elevated everyone's expectations for Mag. If he were to offer only a single dish, then the braised chicken and rice would definitely remain an unforgettable dish that they would look back on even years down the track. However, he was now presenting a second dish, and everyone was eagerly anticipating this dish with lofty expectations. The king had finished his entire portion of braised chicken and rice, which indicated that he was clearly very pleased with the chef that the second prince had invited to Rodu. This was most definitely a positive development for Josh in his quest to inherit the throne. The attendant once again laid down a platter in front of the king in a respectful manner. "This dish is known as black pepper steak. Chef Mag advises using a knife and fork to slice the steak into small pieces, then dipping it into the accompanying black pepper sauce prior to consumption." As he removed the lid from the platter, the aromas of beef and wine swept through the entire palace like a hurricane. The king's eyes lit up slightly in response. He didn't have any hobbies in life other than wine tasting. He was far from being an alcoholic, but it had already become a habit of his to drink a glass of wine before going to bed every night. The fragrance of the wine emanating from this steak was not inferior in the slightest compared to the wine that the royal palace purchased from the Buffett winery on a yearly basis. In fact, this wine seemed to have an even richer fragrance than the premium wine from the Buffett winery. He had been feeling slightly full after eating an entire portion of braised chicken and rice, but he felt as if additional stomach capacity had suddenly been unlocked as soon as he caught a whiff of the steak before him. He raised a hand, and a female servant hurried over to him before picking up his knife and fork and slicing the steak into bite-sized chunks. Abraham inhaled the aroma swirling within the palace with an intoxicated look on his face. "The fragrance of this wine is simply mesmerizing. You'd think that beef and wine would be an abhorrent combination, but the two aromas seem to complement one another perfectly." Abraham was staring directly at the portion of steak on the table in front of Josh, and a trail of drool was threatening to teeter over the corner of his lips. "You've truly unearthed a treasure, Your Highness." Josh only hesitated momentarily before turning to one of the female servants with a smile as he instructed, "Duke Abraham has always been an avid lover of good food, and I'm feeling rather full already after eating that portion of braised chicken and rice, so please give my steak to the Duke." "Are you serious?" Abraham couldn't help but exclaim as his eyes lit up with joy. "Of course." Josh nodded with a smile in response. The female servant picked up the portion of beef from Josh's table in a respectful manner before transferring it to Abraham's table. "You have my thanks, Your Highness." Abraham only had time to deliver a few words of gratitude before his attention was completely drawn to the steak before him. Up close, the steak was smelling even more irresistible, and only now he caught a whiff of a unique aroma intermingled with the fragrance of the beef and the wine. It was the aroma of black pepper. For a veteran foodie like him, black pepper was naturally not an unfamiliar condiment. Perhaps it was because this condiment was far too expensive, but he had never seen a chef who could truly make good use of black pepper in their dishes. All they did was apply black pepper to their dishes for a unique novelty effect rather than actually using it to enhance the flavor of a dish. However, that was clearly not the case for this dish. The aroma of the black pepper combined with the delectable fragrance of the beef to such harmonious perfection that it was simply a match made in heaven. It was as if these two were always meant to be, and as if this was the only correct way that beef should be eaten. What a stroke of genius! Abraham couldn't help but praise as he eagerly picked up his cutlery. He then sliced into the steak as carefully as if he were treating an artistic masterpiece before gently placing the morsel of steak into his mouth. The beef was even more tender than he imagined, and as he bit down into it, an abundance of wine and meat juices flooded into his mouth. These flavors then combined with the black pepper sauce, and he felt as if a magic caster had unleashed a spell directly in his mouth. All of his taste buds were cast into a state of complete ecstasy, and the complexity of the flavors made him feel as if he were experiencing something new and different with each passing second. After swallowing the mouthful of beef, he felt as if a flow of warmth had slid down his throat, filling his entire body with a warm sensation that almost made him moan with pleasure. The flavor is so warm and delicious, yet so highly addictive. Is this chef an angel or a demon? Abraham sliced off a second chunk of beef before putting it in his mouth, closing his eyes to carefully savor every single minute aspect of this amazing culinary experience. This was by far the best dish he had tasted today. The roast beef cubes from the day before were also quite delicious, but they were much more suited to be a street food compared to this steak. In such a grand and illustrious palace, it was only fitting for one to eat black pepper steak with a knife and a fork in a graceful manner. Irina inspected the steak before her with a curious expression. "So he can roast beef cubes and also cook slabs of beef like this? Let me see what this tastes like compared to the roast beef from yesterday." Irina placed a small chunk of beef in her mouth, upon which her eyes immediately lit up before narrowing with a blissful smile. After swallowing the mouthful of beef, she licked her lips to catch the residual black pepper sauce. "As expected of my man, he can do anything. This steak tastes completely different compared to the roast beef from yesterday, but it's just as delicious." Irina opened her eyes and ate another chunk of beef. The blissful smile on her face had Josh looking on in a completely entranced manner. Yes. Big sister Irina is definitely falling in love with father's cooking. Amy glanced at Irina with a joyful expression before turning to Josh, upon which her little brows furrowed with displeasure. "Is he staring at my beautiful big sister Irina? That's not allowed. She belongs to father. I'm going to keep an eye on you. Where did His Highness find such a genius of a chef? His cooking skills are absolutely extraordinary. Indeed. This present is better than anything else anyone could offer to His Majesty. This really is a thoughtful gesture from His Highness." The officials who were familiar with each other began to discuss quietly among themselves. It was quite clear that Josh had achieved his objective. "Luna, the one who's offering these dishes to His Majesty couldn't be that Mr. Mag you were talking about, could he?" The elderly man sitting beside Luna turned to her with a surprised expression. He had heard that Mr. Mag had been invited to Rhoda by the second prince to cook during the king's birthday banquet, but how could such a brilliant mathematician also be such an outstanding chef? "That's right, Grandpa, he is indeed Mr. Mag. He works as a chef and a restaurant owner, and mathematics is only his hobby." Byron Field faltered slightly upon hearing this before heaving an emotional sigh. "Even as a hobbyist, he had reached a level that I couldn't hope to reach in my entire life. I really am looking forward to meeting this young man now. That's right, he's a true genius. A hint of admiration appeared in Luna's eyes as a mental image of Mag surfaced in her mind. This one is for His Majesty, and these two are for the two princes. This one is for the elven princess, this one is for Master Krasu, and these are for the rest of the guests. All of them have different flavors, so you have to make absolutely sure that you don't misplace them. Mag delivered a set of instructions to the 10 female servants with a serious expression before sending them on their way. He looked on as they departed, and a wide smile suddenly appeared on his face. Josh, Sean, care for some 4 times insanely spicy grilled fish. The braised chicken and rice and black pepper steak had dealt many of the guests present heavy psychological blows. It was already bad enough that they could only see and smell the dishes without being able to taste them, yet their frustrations were only being compounded further by the unreserved praise delivered by all those who had tasted the dishes. When the king finally finished his steak and put on a content smile, everyone heaved internal sighs of relief, thinking that their ordeal was over. However, the voice of a demon suddenly sounded outside the palace. The chef invited by the second prince will now be offering his third dish to His Majesty. The attendant entered the palace once again with the same 10 female servants. On this occasion, the platters they were holding were more than twice as large as those with the previous 2 dishes. There's more. Even the king himself was rather surprised. Having finished the braised chicken and rice and black pepper steak, he had already eaten far more than his average daily intake of food. This was because the dishes offered by this extraordinary chef had completely awakened his appetite, which had lain dormant for many years already. The fact that a single chef was able to cook 2 dishes of such an incredible caliber was a sufficient indication of his skills. However, who would have thought that he would offer up a third dish? Even though his stomach was already bulging slightly, the king was still very much looking forward to this third dish. It had yet to be seen whether he would have sufficient stomach capacity to eat it or not, but he truly was curious what this third dish could be. In contrast, Sean's heart sank upon seeing this third dish. Was there no end to this man's brilliance? He was regretting not killing Mag the day before now. Even though that would further worsen his relationship with Josh, their relationship was already so bad that it wouldn't have mattered anyway. On the contrary, Josh wanted nothing better than to sing for joy. However, he had to control his expression and emotions during the king's birthday banquet, so he couldn't express his elation. Your Majesty, this dish is known as spicy grilled fish, please enjoy. The attendant lifted the lid on the platter, revealing a grilled fish that was covered in red chili peppers. The scorching aroma wafting toward the king from the dish made him furrow his brows involuntarily. However, what was surprising to him was that the aroma of the dish wasn't a very sharp nor overwhelming one. Instead, it smelled extremely enticing. There was certainly a hint of spiciness to the aroma, but it was very much at a manageable level. Even though the king was already satiated after eating the previous 2 dishes, he was struck by the impulse to pick up his chopsticks again. Beneath the layer of red chili peppers was a whole fish. The skin of the fish was slightly charred, and the criss-crossing knife incisions made on the body of the fish allowed the red juices around it to seep into the flesh of the fish. Josh was observing the king's expression this entire time, and a faint smile appeared on his face. He was worried that this dish would be too much for his father to handle, but it was quite clear from the look on his face that he was very much looking forward to eating the dish. During this birthday banquet, the king had eaten virtually nothing aside from the dishes cooked by Mag, so Mag was almost guaranteed to win the Best Dish of the Day award. That was undoubtedly very good news for Josh. The female servants carefully carried the platters in their hands onto their designated tables before lifting the lids. A rich spicy aroma immediately wafted through the air like an explosion of spiciness. What the hell is this? Sean recoiled reflexively as his eyes watered from the intense spicy aroma that assaulted his senses. He felt as if there were a palpable aura of spiciness in the air, and just inhaling it was making his throat run dry. Josh sat before his own 4 times insanely spicy grilled fish, and even though his eyes were also watering, he forced a smile onto his face as he said, there's no need to be so alarmed, brother. This spicy grilled fish is renowned for its intensely spicy flavor, but it's also extremely delicious, and is truly an incredible dish. He had thought that Mag would drop the level of spiciness a little, but after inhaling the scent drifting from the dish, it appeared that it was even spicier than last time. But what could he do? Mag was a chef who had been invited to Rhoda by him, so no matter how much the dish was making his eyes water, he could only force a blissful smile onto his face, and pretend that those were tears of joy swirling within his eyes. Josh stole a glance at the king, only to find that the latter was still quite composed, and he heaved an internal sigh of relief. At the same time, he praised internally. I didn't think that father would be such an avid lover of spicy food. Looks like Mag was spot on with this dish. This level of spiciness was clearly far too severe for anyone to handle, and Sean was just about to voice his protests when caught sight of the king picking up his chopsticks. As such, he could only swallow his words and sit in silence. It smells so spicy, but it also smells so good. The fish look a little small, though. I have no doubt that the dish would be very delicious, but such small fish tend to have a lot of small fish bones, which makes them rather inconvenient to eat. All of the representatives of the different races were looking down at their spicy grilled fish dishes with hesitant expressions. After tasting the first two extraordinary dishes, expectations for Mag had reached an all-time high. However, the strong spicy aroma and the intimidating layer of red chili peppers spread over the dish struck everyone with a sense of wariness. Is it really that spicy? Why is it that it doesn't smell all that spicy to me at all? Irina took a deep whiff of her spicy grilled fish before turning to look at everyone else with a confused expression on her face. She then murmured to herself, I didn't think that he would have even mastered grilling fish. Just what can't he cook? He's posing a real threat to my position as the family chef. Just as everyone was hesitating whether they should eat the dish or not, the king had already led by example and dug into his grilled fish first. As soon as the morsel of fish at the end of his chopsticks entered his mouth, a genuine smile appeared on his face. This was a smile that came directly from the bottom of his heart, and it was the best form of praise and approval that he could extend toward this dish. After swallowing his first mouthful of fish, the king nodded to everyone else, and said, "The fish is very delicious. You should all give it a try." "Yes, father." Josh immediately heeded the king's call, picking up a large chunk of fish with his chopsticks. The spicy juices had already stained the fish a bright red, and he had to force down the urge to recoil as he placed the morsel of fish in his mouth. It only took a split second for Josh's mouth and tongue to go completely numb. His face immediately turned as red as a cooked lobster, and sweat began pouring down his face. He had experienced this sensation once the day before yesterday, except it was clearly even fiercer and more pronounced on this occasion. The absurdly spicy flavor made his mind go completely blank, and tears were already threatening to flow down his face, but he had to force back the urge to cry out in pain. Just a little more. Just a little more and it'll start to taste good. Josh offered words of consolation and encouragement to himself as he clenched his fists tightly beneath the table. The blank numbing sensation in his mind persisted for a short while before finally passing. What followed was the extremely delicious flavor of the Kirin carp that had been cooked to perfection. In that instant, Josh felt as if he had been propelled straight from the pits of a fiery hell into a blissful heaven. He knew from past experience that only by continuing to eat without any pause could he keep this spicy flavor at bay. Josh's face was starting to look like a chunk of charcoal that had been taken directly out of a furnace, and sweat was pouring down this face, but he couldn't stop eating. Sean took a glance at Josh, who was eating like a madman, and he also mustered up his courage as he took his first bite of fish. NGH, Sean's face turned as red as a beetroot in an instant. His mouth and tongue had gone completely numb, and he almost reflexively spat out the mouthful of fish. However, Josh was still eating up a storm right across from him, so he could only repress this powerful urge as he clenched his fists beneath the table. This level of spiciness was definitely something a normal person couldn't handle. However, if he were to do something unbefitting of a prince in such an important setting, all of his prior efforts could go to waste. Andrei wasn't going to let a disgraceful prince inherit his throne. As such, even though the spicy flavor wreaking havoc in his mouth made him want to throw his head back and roar to the heavens, he had to force a blissful smile onto his face. This is absolute torture. Sean had been through countless life and death situations on the battlefield. He had crawled out from beneath piles of corpses before, and compared to Josh, who had never even left Rodu, he had sacrificed much more for a chance to inherit the throne. For a man who wasn't a fan of spicy food, such a fearsomely spicy dish almost made him faint on the spot. His fingernails were digging so hard into the palms of his hands that they were drawing blood, yet that was nothing compared to the agony coursing through his mouth. His eyes had also become completely bloodshot, yet he had to force himself not to make a single sound. Is this level of spiciness really within the tolerance range for a human? Why is it that father looks like he's enjoying the dish so much? Could it be that Josh asked that chef to make my dish extra spicy? Countless questions flashed through Sean's mind in an instant, and he felt like a wounded beast. Just as he thought that this torture would never end, the numb sensation in his mouth gradually faded, and the delicious flavor of the fish began to soothe his ravaged taste buds. The crispy fish skin and tender flesh of the fish practically melted in his mouth. Furthermore, there wasn't even as much as a single fish bone to be found, and it was incredible that the torturous spicy flavor from just a moment ago could be masking something so delectable. The imagery of long-awaited rain falling on a parched desert surfaced in his mind, and this was an indescribable feeling. Thus, he swallowed his first mouthful of fish. The morsel of fish felt as if it had been pulled straight out of molten lava, and as it slowly slid down his esophagus, he felt as if a flame had been set alight in his heart. The twisting sensation in his stomach was causing him quite a bit of discomfort, and the scorching sensation in his mouth had returned, making him feel as if his tongue were being used as a pincushion. The logical part of his mind told him to never touch this fish ever again, but he simply couldn't stop his chopsticks as they picked up another morsel of fish and fed it to his mouth. The delicious flavor of the fish managed to repress the scorching spicy sensation again, but that sensation only returned with even greater ferocity, forcing him to immediately eat another chunk of fish. Sean suddenly understood why Josh was eating like a madman. It wasn't that he didn't want to stop eating, he simply couldn't. Thus, both princes began to shovel fish into their mouths in a maddened frenzy as if this was the most delicious thing they had ever eaten. The two princes look like they're thoroughly enjoying that dish. Indeed. I didn't think that the two princes would be so enraptured by a single dish on such a grand occasion. All of the officials looked on with surprise etched on their faces. The two princes had always been quite careful and reserved in their mannerism, but who would have thought that they would suddenly cast aside those facades? They did appear to be eating in a rather disheveled manner, but that only worked to further demonstrate to everyone just how delicious the spicy grilled fish must have been. Phew! The forest troll representative breathed out a ball of flames, which just so happened to land on his leg, and it immediately burst into flames. Thankfully, Richard quickly swooped in and saved the forest troll by casting a water ball spell to douse the flames. This fish is really delicious, but I have to take extra care not to set myself on fire when eating it. The forest troll put down the bowl in its hand with a hint of lingering fear on its face. The grilled fish in front of it had already been completely consumed, and its body had taken on a rather amusing red hue. It really is extremely delicious. I can't get enough of this spicy scorching feeling. The abyss demon sitting next to the forest troll had also turned slightly red as he shoveled chunks of fish relentlessly into his mouth. Aside from the fact that it's a little spicy, it appears that everyone is a fan of this dish. Irina nodded to herself upon seeing this. She picked up a chunk of fish with her chopsticks, dipped it in the red juices down below, and then carefully placed it into her own mouth. The spicy juices struck her tongue with a numb sensation. It was a very strange feeling, as if part of the sensory nerves of her tongue had been obstructed somehow. Immediately thereafter, the delicious flavor of the fish itself began to wreak havoc on the tip of her tongue. The fish skin was crispy yet not burnt, while the meat beneath the skin was very tender and supple. The flavors of the fish and the spicy juices immediately left her wanting more. As she swallowed the mouthful of fish, she felt as if a warm ball of fire had slid down her throat into her body, warming her stomach and evoking within her a sense of bliss and enjoyment. Irina wasn't a fan of fish, as she could never separate the small fish bones from the meat, and it was very unpleasant to have fish bones stuck in her throat. However, to her surprise, that chunk of fish just then was comprised entirely of meat with no fish bones at all. Is this a fish without any small fish bones? Irina's eyes lit up as she ate another mouthful of fish. The chunk of fish practically melted in her mouth, and there weren't any small fish bones in that mouthful, either, only the spicy and delicious skin and flesh of the fish. It's a little spicy, but surely everyone's over-exaggerating things. Or could it be that I have really good aptitude when it comes to eating spicy foods? Irina glanced at Sean and Josh with a slightly perplexed look before eating another mouthful of fish. Her eyes narrowed slightly as a blissful smile appeared on her face. She felt as if she would never tire of eating this dish. No one can resist father's food, because it's just that delicious. Amy wore a joyful smile on her face as she swayed slightly from the side to side and tucked into her own fish. Father really is super awesome. Anyone who eats his food would fall in love with him. Abraham was salivating wildly as he looked on from his seat. As he did so, he thought to himself, after this birthday banquet, I have to find that chef and get him to cook a braised chicken and rice and spicy grilled fish for me. It looks like all three dishes were very much to His Majesty's liking. The chef is almost guaranteed to win the Best Dish of the Day award. Indeed. It looks like His Highness has found a strong ally for himself. By the way, do you know who that little girl is? She's so adorable when she's eating. I heard that Master Krasser recently accepted a half-elf girl as his disciple. She's most likely the one. I heard that Master Krasser paid the Magus Tower a visit with his disciple, and she ended up setting a new tower ascending record and beat President Richard's disciple to the point of tears. Is she that fearsome? All of the officials were discussing quietly among themselves as they appraised Amy with expressions of shock and awe. After the king put down his chopsticks, only a small portion of his spicy grilled fish remained. He had refrained from eating it in the end as he really was starting to get unbearably full. He wiped his hands and his mouth with the silk handkerchief that the attendant had offered to him, and his brows furrowed as he caught sight of Josh and Sean, who were both still eating like barbaric Neanderthals. Josh and Sean seemed to have sensed the king's disapproving gaze, and their expressions changed slightly as they put down their chopsticks at almost the exact same moment. Only the heads remained of the spicy grilled fish in front of them. As soon as they stopped, cold sweat began to bead up on their foreheads. Their mouths and throats immediately felt as if they had been set alight, and the unbearable scorching sensation struck them with the urge to even drink the spicy juices on the platters before them. I'm very pleased with the banquet today. The king pointed at the grilled fish in front of him, and announced, the best dish of the day is this spicy grilled fish. I must commend you for finding such a brilliant chef, Josh. Summon him to the palace, I want to reward him in person. As expected, one of his three dishes was adjudged to be the best of the day. Looks like that chef is going to becoming the new star of the royal kitchen. His Majesty thoroughly enjoyed all three dishes. I wonder what His Majesty's going to reward him with. His Highness really does have a keen eye for talent. He had to have gone to great lengths to find such an exceptional chef. While the attendant rushed off to the invite mag into the palace, many of the officials present took the opportunity to chat among themselves. The officials of Josh's faction were all very pleased with how things had turned out, while the officials that had pledged their allegiance to Sean were all feeling quite tense. The second prince had completely dominated the proceedings so far, and it appeared that Sean had fallen into a severe disadvantage in their battle to appease the king. However, neither Josh nor Sean had the spare mental capacity to consider such matters. Both of them felt as if their mouths and throats were on fire, and the only thing they could think about was how much physical discomfort they were in. Sean picked up a cup of wine and drank it in one go to try and douse the fire. However, the alcohol only made the scorching, stinging sensation worse, and he had to force himself not to blast the mouthful of wine out of his mouth. "Get me a jug of ice water with extra ice cubes," Josh said in a quiet voice to the female servant next to him. He had to down an entire jug of ice water to douse the scorching sensation when he last tasted the dish 2 days ago, and the process of drinking the ice water after eating something so absurdly spicy was an extremely satisfying and exhilarating one. Amy turned to Krasu, and asked, "Master, does this mean Father won?" Krasu nodded with a smile, and replied, "That's right. Boss Mag's grilled fish has been deemed to be the best dish of the day, so he's beaten all of the other chefs." Novan nodded, and chimed in, "Boss Mag really is a genius. In the past, every chef who's won this award has been enlisted to become a chef in the royal kitchen. In that case, will Boss Mag stay here as opposed to returning to Chaos City?" Krasu speculated. "Boss Mag will go back to Chaos City for sure." A confident smile appeared on Novan's face as he said, "I made this trip to Chaos City with 2 objectives in mind. One is to adjust terms of the new Equality Treaty, and the second objective is to take Boss Mag back to Chaos City." Krasu looked at Novan with a perplexed expression on his face. Since when did chefs become so important? A 10th tier great magic caster came all this way to Rhoda for Boss Mag. Novan smiled, and didn't say anything in reply. "As expected of my man, he's exceptional at everything he does." Irina put down her chopsticks with a content expression, and she let slip a small burp as she dabbed at her mouth with her napkin. Even though she wouldn't gain any weight no matter how much she ate, it had been very long since she had gorged herself to this extent. "It looks like he's learned to look after Amy during the 3 years we've been apart, and he's also learned how to cook. I feel like this was almost a good thing," Irina thought to herself as she turned her gaze toward Josh, upon which her expression cooled slightly. "But I'm going to make sure to pluck out all of those bastards who took part in the incident 3 years ago, and I'm going to put them through the most horrendous torture imaginable." After finishing all 3 dishes, Mag was already beginning to clean and pack up his kitchenware in a leisurely manner. Even though it appeared as if he didn't have a care in the world, he was actually feeling rather uneasy. After all, he was here to complete the system's mission, and it would be a tragedy if he couldn't complete the mission. There were too many unstable variables involved in this mission, the most important of which was the king's subjective taste. Even though the attendant had told him that the king had been very pleased with his dishes, he still couldn't be sure of whether one of his 3 dishes would be assigned as the best dish of the day. The meal segment of the birthday banquet was over, and the commotion in the kitchen had suddenly died down. Even though no one had to cook anymore, there were very few chefs who were cleaning their kitchenware in a leisurely manner like Mag was doing. All of the chefs were waiting to see just who had received the award for the best dish of the day. That was the highest accolade in the cooking world, and anyone who received this award would be renowned throughout the entire continent. "Master will receive the award again for sure this time. Master has already won the award 9 years in a row, and he'll be completing the monumental 10 in a row achievement today." "That's right. Master's dishes have always been His Majesty's favorites, and that hasn't changed for many years." All of the chefs around Bellman wore confident expressions on their faces, looking as if they were already preparing for the upcoming celebrations. Meanwhile, Bellman himself remained as calm as ever as he carefully wiped down his cooking bench, seemingly completely uninterested in whether he would receive the award or not. Nandal looked over at Mag, who was also cleaning his cooking bench, and a deriding sneer returned to his face as he said, "If you ask me, Master Bellman is surely going to win the award again. All of the other chefs here still can't compete with him." His usual partner in crime, Vazir, immediately agreed. "Indeed. Not everyone can take the award for the best dish of the day, and no one knows what His Majesty likes better than Master Bellman." The first 2 dishes that Mag had made were indeed candidates for the best dish of the day, but that final grilled fish dish that he had made was simply absurdly spicy. Even from afar, many of the chefs couldn't help but recoil as Mag was making the dish at his cooking station. It was common knowledge to all of the chefs present that the king was not a fan of dishes with overly strong flavors. As such, Mag had surely ruined any chances he had of bagging the most prestigious accolade in the cooking world by presenting that dish to the king. "Brother Mag, you put so many chili peppers into that final fish dish, is it really going to be all right?" Kalyulu's eyes were slightly bloodshot as he looked at Mag with a concerned expression. Tears had been flowing relentlessly from his eyes while Mag was cooking his spicy grilled fish. "I can't even open my eyes now, because they sting so much." "Me too. I feel like a blind man." Luluka and Lukaka were faring even worse than their father. "It should be all right." Mag nodded with a smile. The grilled fish he had served to the king was only a mildly spicy one, and the 4 times insanely spicy grilled fish had only been reserved for Josh and Sean. Amy's portion was of a medium spice level, that was her favorite level of spiciness when it came to the spicy grilled fish. Irina's portion was also a mildly spicy one. Most elves were not fans of strong flavors, and the mildly spicy grilled fish was Sally's favorite. As for everyone else, all of their grilled fish were at the super spicy level. Even if they were going to blame someone for this, they would all cast their resentment toward Josh. He was even regretting his decision not to serve all of them insanely spicy grilled fish. "I guess this is what discrimination looks like." As for Nandal and Vazir, Mag paid them absolutely no heed. For a master like him, it was unbefitting of his skills to go around stomping on small fry like them. Kalyulu was just about to say something when an attendant rushed into the royal kitchen, and loudly announced, "Congratulations to Chef Mag, your spicy grilled fish has been chosen by His Majesty to be the best dish of the day. Please follow me to the palace so His Majesty can reward you in person." The entire royal kitchen abruptly fell silent. All of the chefs turned to the attendant in unison with shock etched on their faces. How is that possible?" Vazir's jaw dropped to the ground as he struggled to process what he was hearing. Nandal's eyes rolled over into the back of his head, and he fell backward like a dead weight. Thankfully, one of his student chefs was standing behind him, and he hurriedly caught Nandal before he could fall to the ground. Everyone had their own guesses about whom the award for the best dish of the day would be presented to, but none of them had imagined that it would be awarded to a completely unknown chef from Chaos City. A tall and thin chef standing beside Bellman strode forward with incredulity etched on his face as he yelled, "That's impossible. Are you sure you've delivered the correct message? How could an unknown chef like him be given this award? Are you sure His Majesty didn't present this award to Chef Bellman instead?" "Exactly. Master has won this award for 9 years in succession, how could he possibly lose? Master cooked over 10 dishes today, but that man has only cooked 3. There must be something wrong here." All of Bellman's students stepped forward to question the verdict with enraged expressions. Many other chefs also chimed in with their protests. Compared to having a chef from Chaos City win the award that was sought after by everyone, it was clearly much easier to accept Bellman winning the award again. At this point, Bellman had also stopped wiping down his cooking bench. There was a hint of dejection on his face, but his eyes were devoid of anger or indignation. The attendant paused in his footsteps in the face of the rioting chefs. He was one of the king's most trusted servants, so he was naturally aware that Bellman had been the king's favorite chef for over a decade. However, the black horse on this occasion was simply too much to contend with. Even Bellman's dishes paled in comparison to his, but the suspicions being raised by Bellman's students were quite justified. However, questioning the king's decision was a sign of disrespect, and that was quite a serious matter. As such, a stern look appeared on the attendant's face as he looked at everyone. He said, "His Majesty adjudged the spicy grilled fish to be the best dish of the day in front of all of the guests in the palace, there's no doubt about that. All 3 of Mr. Mag's dishes have received glowing praise from all of the guests, and he completely deserves to win this award. His Majesty has even made an exception by allowing him to appear in the palace, and if you ask me, That's a clear indication of just how much His Majesty enjoyed Chef Mag's dishes. Furthermore, Mr. Mag is not some unknown chef, he was invited to cook for His Majesty by His Highness, the second Prince, himself. The attendant's words were like a bucket of cold water, immediately dousing the riotous flames that had erupted in the kitchen, and all of the skeptical chefs immediately fell silent. It was quite clear now that Mag had indeed received the award for the best dish of the day. However, what came as even more of a surprise to everyone was that Mag had been invited here by the second prince. If they had known about this beforehand, no one would have dared to look down on him. A chef from Chaos City had beaten all of the top chefs across the entire Norland continent. This was most likely going to be the most incredible news story in the cooking world this year. Wow! Uncle Mag is so badass. He was cooking by himself this entire time, yet he still managed to win the award for the best dish of the day. Uncle Mag is my idol from now on. Lakaka and Luluka looked up at Mag with admiration shimmering in their eyes. To them, this accolade was something that they could only strive for in their dreams, yet Mag had crushed the entire field of competition and won the award in an extremely convincing manner. Lakaka still had yet to pick his jaw back up from the ground as he stared at Mag, and mused, "I guess this is why you should never judge a book by its cover." The attendant made his way over to Mag. He was surprised by just how young Mag was, but he still smiled, and said, "Please come with me now, Mr. Mag. His Majesty and all of the guests in the palace are still waiting." Barring any mishaps, this young chef was most likely going to be the king's favorite for many years to come. Of course, if the second prince were to inherit the throne, then it was quite likely that he would become the top dog in this kitchen. Mag removed his apron and merely nodded with a calm smile as he followed the attendant out of the kitchen. Was he not happy? No, he was over the moon. He was naturally overjoyed that he had completed the system's mission. He felt as if a sword hanging above his head had just been removed, and he was filled with relief and elation. Mag nodded at Kalyalu and his sons with a smile before departing. He was quite fond of this chubby trio. As for all of the resentful and envious expressions on the faces of the other chefs, they only worked to fuel Mag's elation. All of them clearly wanted nothing better than to beat him to death, but they were simply unable to do so, and the sight of their frustration filled Mag with joy. Just as Mag was about to exit the royal kitchen, Bellman wiped his hand dry with a hand towel before offering his hand to Mag with a smile. "Congratulations, Chef Mag." Mag paused in his footsteps and hesitated slightly at the sight of the smiling old man. He then accepted his handshake with a smile of his own, and replied, "Thank you. Even though I didn't get the honor of tasting your dishes, I can tell by their names that they must all be very interesting dishes. I hope all young chefs can be as creative and innovative as you. That would be vastly fortunate for our cooking world." Bellman looked into Mag's eyes with a genuine expression of gratification on his face. "I'm sure it will be." Mag smiled and nodded in response. Bellman's smile widened as he released Mag's hand, and said, "Go on, then. Getting the award for the first time is quite exciting, so make sure to savor the moment. It won't be as exhilarating when you get it for a second or third time, as I'm sure you will." "Sure." Mag nodded in response. He had developed a positive first impression of this skilled yet benevolent old man. After exiting the royal kitchen, the attendant led Mag toward the palace, instructing Mag on some key points of etiquette along the way. This was his first time facing the king, so Mag made sure to commit all of these points of etiquette to memory. After all, in a feudal society like this one, any misstep could result in punishment by decapitation. Right at this moment, the system's voice sounded within Mag's mind. "Ding! Congratulations on beating all of the best chefs of the Norland continent and securing the Best Dish Award with your spicy grilled fish. You will receive the Super Reward Package, which consists of a single opportunity to temporarily return to the height of your powers, as well as an upgrade of the restaurant to level 3. You may check the right you've unlocked following the upgrade when you return to the restaurant. Holy F***ck. Han Li couldn't help but exclaim upon hearing this. The attendant up ahead turned to Mag with a perplexed look. A slightly awkward expression appeared on Mag's face as he explained, "Sorry, I have a long reflex arc, which means my reactions are rather slow. The excitement of meeting the king for the first time has only just caught up to me." A smile appeared on the attendant's face upon hearing this. It was indeed a monumental opportunity to be able to meet the king. In the past, he had seen many people who were too nervous to even walk properly on their way to meeting the king for the first time, so Mag was already one of the calmer people he had seen in this position. "There's no need to worry, His Majesty is a very benevolent man." Mag nodded in response, but he was still reeling internally. Of course, he wasn't reeling at the prospect of being able to meet the king, it was just that the system's reward had given him a massive surprise. He had thought that the so-called super reward package would consist of something like a strength point, but not that it would be a chance to temporarily return to the height of his powers. What did that mean? It meant that he would become the most powerful knight on the entire Norland continent for a short time. He would become the Dragon Slayer, Mag Alex. The height of his powers stood at the pinnacle of the entire Norland continent. System, when you say the height of my powers, you mean the height of Mag Alex's powers, right? Mag inquired for confirmation. Whom else could I be referring to? Keyboard warrior Shen Mag, the system replied with a question of its own. Mag was suddenly struck by a sense of mixed emotions. Since when did the system become so cheeky? What's wrong with being a keyboard warrior? If it weren't for my exploits as a keyboard warrior, you wouldn't even have been created. At the height of my powers, I would have stood close to the pinnacle of all keyboard warriors, just like how Alex once stood at the pinnacle of this continent. Mag retorted internally. Is that right? Should I change the reward so you can get a chance to return to the height of your power as keyboard warrior Shen Mag instead? I can even throw in a keyboard free of charge. That won't be necessary. I'm still every bit the keyboard warrior as I was during my heyday. Mag immediately refused. Returning to the height of Mag Alex's powers would transform him into the most powerful being on the entire continent. In contrast, what was he going to do with a keyboard? Bring it into battle and swat his opponents to death with it. System, how long will I be able to attain this level of power for? Mag asked. This reward was like a talisman that could save his life in a dire situation. The power boost will last a maximum of 10 minutes. After 10 minutes, you'll return to your base state, and you'll also be debilitated for a period of time, so make sure to use this power wisely, the system replied in a serious voice. 10 minutes? What am I supposed to be? Ultraman? And I'll be debilitated afterward as well. Mag's brows furrowed upon hearing this. The time limit was far shorter than he had anticipated. Ultraman has yet to be verified as an actual living organism. However, after watching the entire Ultraman series, the system has discovered that all of the monsters defeated by Ultraman could have existed on Earth at some point in time. However, are you really a food system? What are you doing watching the entire Ultraman series? Mag was suddenly struck by an urge to laugh. The system was viewing the series to assess the viability of using those monsters as ingredients for cooking. An exceptional chef should always be trying to explore new ingredients and cooking methods. You should learn from the system in that regard, forget it. How about you spend your time researching existing ingredients instead? Mag rolled his eyes in response. He cast his gaze toward the glamorous palace up ahead and took a deep breath before hurriedly following the attendant into the palace. The female servants had cleared away all of the delectable dishes on the tables, and replaced them with plates of fresh fruits and desserts. Everyone was eagerly awaiting the arrival of this extraordinary chef Mag. He had been invited to Rotu to cook for the king, and the king himself had also been extremely impressed with his dishes. It was quite clear that he was going to be a rising star in the royal kitchen, and everyone was very curious about just what kind of man he was. He must be a chef with vast experience to be able to cook such delicious dishes, so he must be quite old, right? What a pity! Many of the female guests present were heaving forlorn sighs internally. If he reveals his true identity right now, he would be sweeping up a massive storm across the entire Norland continent. It's just that he lacks concrete evidence to prove that the assassination ever took place, so he won't be able to achieve much. Irina furrowed her brows with a contemplative look on her face. But if he's not here to reveal the truth to everyone, then why did he accept the invitation to Rodu? Surely he couldn't have come here just so he could earn this Best Dish award. Irina was unable to comprehend what Mag was trying to do. He was clearly nowhere near as powerful as in the past, and no matter how perfect his disguise was, there was always a chance that his cover could be blown, especially when he was receiving such widespread scrutiny. So why was he taking this risk? So be it. Regardless of what happens, I'm going to protect you and Xiaomi, and I'm going to make sure that no one ever hurts you again, Irina vowed to herself. She cast her gaze toward Amy, who was joyfully munching on a large apple, and a warm light gradually surfaced in her eyes. Byron turned to Luna with a shocked expression, and asked, "That's the Mr. Mag you were talking about?" The multiplication table that Mag had presented was absolutely revolutionary, and only a mathematical genius could come up with such a simple yet vastly useful tool. He had been studying mathematics for several decades, and even he was stunned by Mag's brilliancy. However, a genius mathematician like him had also just received the Best Dish award during the king's birthday banquet. This was absolutely absurd to him, and for a moment, he thought he had to have been dreaming. Luna smiled and nodded as she replied, "That's right. Mr. Mag's cooking is the most delicious I've ever had, and he's also the most brilliant mathematician I've ever seen. What a freakish prodigy!" Byron heaved a long sigh with an expression of awe and wonder on his face. He was looking forward to seeing Mag even more now. Indeed, he's someone that makes everyone want to look up to him, Luna thought to herself. Mag had never disappointed her, and it seemed that he was full of surprises and miracles. Richard wore a slightly dark expression as he remained seated in his chair. Even though Josh had been the one who had invited this chef and he was a part of Josh's political faction, he simply couldn't stomach the fact that this chef Mag was the father of that little half-elf brat. If it weren't for the fact that Krasua and Josh were present in the palace, he would be extremely tempted to kill her on the spot. As for Josh and Sean, neither of them had any spare mental capacity to worry about what anyone else was thinking. Both of them were too busy eagerly awaiting the jugs of ice water they had requested. Right at this moment, a loud announcement sounded from outside the palace. "Chef Mag is here." Everyone turned their attention toward the entrance of the palace in unison. They were first greeted by the sight of the attendant who had been ordered to fetch Mag to the palace, followed by a young man in a black and white chef's suit. This man had a tall and graceful build, and his black and white chef's suit complemented his figure very well. His short brown hair had been combed in an immaculate manner, and the mustache on his handsome face further contributed to enhancing his good looks. One of the female guests present couldn't help but exclaim, "Is that the chef? Oh my God, he's so handsome!" Mag strode into the palace with a benevolent and mature smile on his face. His impeccable chef's suit was spotlessly clean, and he didn't look like a chef who had just walked out from a kitchen at all. "He's got the looks and he can cook. Is this what the perfect man looks like? I've always wanted to marry a man who's a good cook, but all good cooks are old men. I didn't think there would be such an exceptional chef who's so young and handsome. Father, after receiving this award, he's going to be rewarded with a dukeship, right? Will I be able to marry him then?" All of the young female guests' eyes lit up. To think that there could exist such an exceptional chef who was also so young and handsome, he was absolutely irresistible. All of the female guests were struggling to keep their legs closed. These shameless women! How dare they gawk at my man like that? Irina cast a cold glance toward all of the love-struck women, and a dangerous light flashed through her eyes. All of the women felt a chill run down their spine in unison, and they looked around in bewilderment, but were unable to identify why they had been struck by such an ominous feeling. Mag also had a hint of a smug smile on his face after hearing all of the praise from the female guests present. He was still ecstatic about beating all of the best chefs across the Norland continent and receiving such a fantastic reward from the system, so he was starting to get a little carried away upon hearing these words of praise. However, he suddenly caught sight of the cold expression on Irina's face, and he felt as if he had been teleported straight from a scorching desert to the coldest part of the South Pole. His smile immediately stiffened on his face, and he shuddered involuntarily before hurriedly adopting a serious expression. Holy F***ck. I forgot she was here. Mag's heart rate had suddenly spiked through the roof. He felt as if he had just brushed shoulders with death. Humph! You'd better not let me catch you again. Irina withdrew her gaze, but she was still feeling rather irritated. In the past, Alex had no eyes for any woman other than her. However, it appeared that he had become not just a chef in the past 3 years, but also a chick magnet. Mag turned his attention to Amy and gave her a wide smile. Even though they had been apart for an entire morning, Mag wasn't worried in the slightest about whether Amy was hungry or not. With all of this delicious food being served in the palace, there was no way that she was sitting on an empty stomach. Amy waved at Mag with a joyful expression on her face, but she was smart enough not to call out to him. Mag then caught sight of Luna, and he nodded in her direction. The man sitting beside her was most likely her grandfather, a man whom Alex recalled to be a rambling alcoholic. Byron looked at Mag and heaved an internal sigh. I didn't think that he would truly be so young. If his multiplication table could enter widespread usage, his name would go down in the history books for sure. All of the other officials were also quite surprised to see that Mag was such a young man. One had to realize that Chef Bellman was already over 60 years old, and had been the head chef of the royal kitchen for close to 30 years, yet he had just lost to a young man who appeared to be no more than 30 years of age. Mag wasn't nervous in the slightest. He had been in much more nerve-wracking scenarios than this in his past life, so there really was nothing for him to be nervous about here. However, he did manage to find quite a few familiar faces in the palace as he sifted through Alex's memories. Most of the officials gathered had already pledged their allegiance to either Josh or Sean. However, there was also quite a considerable proportion of them who hadn't picked either prince to side with. They were either fence-sitters or were loyal only to the king. In Mag's eyes, this was like a more serious version of a battle for a family's inheritance. However, the stakes were much higher, and the winner would be inheriting an entire empire rather than a family. It was a pity that he didn't have any brothers in his past life with whom he could battle for the family inheritance. In the end, he inherited several tens of billions of dollars without any competition, and it felt rather anticlimactic. Mag turned his attention to the two princes, who were both drenched with sweat and chugging down ice water, and his mood was lifted significantly. Josh forced a smile onto his face as he met Mag's gaze. Even though he was still suffering quite a bit, the good news was that Sean was suffering just as much. Most importantly, the king had been very happy with Mag's dishes, and that further boosted his chances of inheriting the throne. Mag gave a rather apologetic smile in response, but there was not a single hint of apology in his heart. As for Sean's furious and resentful gaze, Mag completely ignored it. That's what you get for trying to assassinate me. This is just the beginning. According to the system's warning, anything above 3 times insanely spicy results in a qualitative change. You can say goodbye to your holes. The attendant led Mag to the center of the palace before respectfully backing away. Mag composed his expression before extending a respectful bow toward the king. Mag pays his respects to His Majesty. The king was also rather surprised to see how young Mag was, but he didn't let it show as he raised a hand, and said, "You may rise, Chef Mag. I didn't think a man as young as you would be able to cook such delicious dishes." Mag stood up straight again and adopted a modest expression as he replied, "Thank you for your kind words, Your Majesty. I'm still sorely lacking in experience compared to many of my senior peers." I am really honored to receive such a prestigious accolade. Compared to Alex's memory of the king 3 years ago, Andrei seemed to have aged significantly. His inky black hair had turned completely grey, and there were many more wrinkles on his face. However, he was still exuding an air of undeniable regal majesty as he sat atop his throne. He was like an elderly lion king. Even though he was past his prime, he could still guard his own territory if challenged. Mag wasn't sure about whether he had played a hand in the incident from 3 years ago. However, at the very least, he had covered up for the two princes, so he was guilty of involvement by association at a minimum. The king shook his head with a smile, and said, "Even though you're indeed quite young, you have well and truly reached the pinnacle of the culinary arts. All three of your dishes were simply exceptional, so there's no need for you to be overly modest." Mag withdrew his gaze in a respectful manner as he said, "You're far too kind, Your Majesty." Josh put down his jug of ice water. The scorching sensation in his throat had already abated slightly. He adjusted his robe slightly before smiling as he said, "Father, Chef Mag's cooking skills are by far the best in Chaos City," and he had defeated the incumbent #1 chef of Chaos City at the time prior to coming to Rodu. The fact that you have decided to award his grilled fish as the best dish of the day is further testament to his exemplary cooking skills. I can tell you put a lot of effort into finding such an exceptional chef, Josh." The king nodded before turning to Mag as he said, "Chef Mag's cooking skills are the best I've ever seen, and he is very deserving of the Best Dish award. I've decided to reward him with 1,000 dragon coins and to instate him as the head chef of the royal kitchen with immediate effect." All of the officials in the palace burst into an uproar upon hearing this. Mag lowered his head in apology, and said, "Thank you for your kindness, Your Majesty. Unfortunately, I already own a restaurant in Chaos City, so I won't be able to remain in the royal palace. As such, I must refuse this reward."